Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto learns Sage Mode early part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Minato was not having a good day. Sure, it started out fine, just like any other. Then Kushina had gone into labor, and October 10th had gone from decent to wonderful. He was a father to a beautiful boy named Naruto. Then some masked man claiming to be Madara Uchiha had not only found out about the Anbu guarded cave where his son was born, but had gotten past the guards, killed Sarutobi's wife, kidnapped his son, taken Kushina when Minato went to save Naruto, released the Nine Tails in the middle of the village, and just when Minato had him, he escaped anyway. If Minato lived through today, a feat getting less and less likely, he would despise October the 10th. However, Minato had to prioritize. And right now the biggest priority was dealing with the Nine Tails. The beast had so many legends spread about it, and its fearsome power, and lived up to every single one. Killing this kind of beast was beyond even the first Hokage, and was definitely beyond his own skills. But while Minato might not have the tailed beast suppressing with style, he did have something the first didn't. Sealing. All he had to do was keep the Nine Tails occupied long enough to finish the job. Minato glanced at the raging tails and gave up any hope of holding the thing down himself. Minato bit his thumb and ran through the hand signs. He jumped above the Nine Tails and slammed his palm down. And in a puff of smoke the great beast was gone. Not quite gone yet, Minato reminded himself. Using the Flying Thunder God on 2 targets of such size was straining even for him. And he still had to get Kushina and the container for the Nine Tails. Gamabunta, I need you to hold this thing down while I prepare the seal. No promises. I might finish him off before you get back, said the large chief of the Toads. As it turned out, the new chief still had some growing to do mentally. In the scarce minute that Minato was gone, the Nine Tails had managed to slice his stomach despite the Toad playing a careful defense. Any wounds inflicted by the Toad's blade seemed to disappear within seconds. Gamabunta stuck to firing off water bullets from a distance after almost having his guts spilled over the forest. Minato returned, now with a small child and his dying wife. Minato summoned a sealing altar on top of Gamabunta's head and put the child down on the platform to begin the sealing. Any other day, Gamabunta would have been angry at being treated like a glorified table, but today he realized it was something he had to overlook. Gamabunta wasn't the only one to notice the presence of a sealing altar and a Jinchuriki to be. The Nine Tails roared in anger before sprinting at Gamabunta to try and interrupt the sealing. Minato shouted something as well, and though it was drowned out by the Nine Tails' fury, Gamabunta could guess what it was he had to do. Just as the Nine Tails neared him, the Toad leapt into the air and stabbed the Nine Tails' reaching paw into the ground with his sword. Minato finished whatever he had been doing on top of the Toad's head, and a pressing feeling of death overtook the area. The Nine Tails roared again, not in rage this time, but something more akin to fear or annoyance. Then the beast shrunk. Gamabunta couldn't find any other way to explain it. The Nine Tails went from a healthy-looking, if enormous and nine-tailed, fox to a scrawny, laughable facsimile of the terrifying beast it was. But the Nine Tails was anything but weak, even in its diluted state. Gamabunta's eyes widened as the Nine Tails lunged forward with its claws, threatening to impale what Gamabunta presumed was the new Jinchuriki on top of his head. Gamabunta tried to dodge the attack, but it had come from such a close range he had no real chance of dodging it completely. Still, Gamabunta, though he had evaded it as the claw passed over his eye by several feet, not much in relation to the two beasts fighting. As it was, the Toad ended up with a wound over his left eye, the Nine Tails' corrosive chakra leaving a massive scar. He had blinked on reflex, the only thing preventing him from losing his eye entirely. The feeling of death came on seemingly twice as strong as before, and the Nine Tails roared in absolute fury at being entirely sealed into a newborn baby. Gamabunta looked down as he saw Minato Namikaze, the Yellow Flash, the 4th Hokage of the village hidden in the leaves, fall to the forest floor alongside his wife, Kushina Uzumaki. His summoner dead, Gamabunta returned to Mount Myobokuzen, his last image that of the 3rd Hokage catching their bodies. Gamabunta returned to the sound of toads all around and a cacophony of questions. "Quiet!" yelled Gamabunta, one at a time. The crowd parted to allow 2 toads through, one green and one purple, both only as big as Gamabunta's eye. These were Fukasaku and Shima, the elder toad sages of Mount Myobokuzen. Of course, the young hotshot of a chief liked to remind them mostly of the elder part of their title. Little Minato's name is no longer on the wall of summoners. As the last toad summoned, "Do you know anything we don't?" asked Fukasaku, the little green toad. He died defeating the Nine Tails. I don't know the circumstances around the fight, but if Minato hadn't have sealed the thing when he did, I might not be here," said Gamabunta. "That's Minato for you. Even when he's facing the Nine Tails, he still manages to win. He was a good summoner, murmured Shima. By the way, boy, I can see the scar on your eye and your gut coming from the Nine Tails claws, but what on earth caused that thing on your head? Asked Fukasaku. What? Exclaimed Gamabunta as he reached up on his head in a panic. His hand settled on a lump in the middle of his head that hadn't been there before. As soon as he covered the bump, it began to cry. Be quiet up there, the Toad Chief yelled. This, of course, did nothing but make the lump cry all the louder. Shima jumped up on the chief's head to see what was up on his head, as it was now clearly not a battle wound. Upon reaching the crying mass, she discovered it to be a child, not even a day old yet, with blonde hair and 3 marks down the sides of his cheeks. Looking at the ceiling altar he was placed upon, Shima shouted down to Gamabunta, "It looks like the new Jinchuriki tagged along for the ride back. We can't get him back to the Hidden Leaf now that Minato's dead. We could send a message to Jiraiya. Then again, I don't want to be trusting him with a baby." "You two are plenty old enough to have raised a lot of tadpoles in your time. What's one more for a short time?" asked Gamabunta mockingly. "That might not be the worst idea you've had, boy. I guess we can care for the little tadpole for a while. After all, he looks enough like him to be Minato's son. We could use a new summoner. Then again, we might be too old for the job. Why don't you take the crying, pooping, crying, eating, crying little tyke, eh?" said Fukasaku as Shima joined him on the ground, now carrying the baby. "Oh no, that's quite, generous, but you know, I have a young one of my own all the way and you two would be a much better influence on him. I couldn't deprive you of such joy when I already have my own," stammered Gamabunta as he quietly regretted his choice to mock his elder's age. "So boy, does the tyke have a name?" asked Shima. "I don't know." A light green toad about the size of a horse with a ridiculous bow and makeup hopped forward and spoke up in an equally ridiculously high voice. "I remember Jiraiya Honey mentioning how Minato's son was going to be named after the main character of his first book. So his name is probably Naruto. Could I get a closer look at little Naruto? He is so cute I could simply—" "Thank you for your help, Gamariki. I think we should get Naruto here settled if he's to be staying for any length of time," interrupted Fukasaku. "Well, you don't have to be so rude about it," replied Gamariki as his voice dropped several octaves. With that, the toads all went their separate ways to both mourn Minato's death and rejoice in having found a new prospective summoner so soon. Gamabunta went to lick his wound, figuratively, by soaking in one of Mount Myobokuzen's oil springs. Fukasaku and Shima carried the now identified Naruto to their house to get a room ready for him, and hopefully stop his incessant crying. Fukasaku hoped that Naruto would be an acceptable replacement for Minato as a summoner. Little did he know that Naruto would smash his expectations into 1,000 pieces. "Naruto!" "Coming," replied the 4-year-old boy. Naruto had deep blue eyes and shockingly yellow hair. He stood at a little less than 4 feet, but that was still plenty tall enough to tower over the small green toad that had called him over. "Naruto," began Fukasaku, "these past years Shima and I have raised you as one of our own tadpoles. Do you know why? Because it's up to me to be the next toad summoner." "I know this, Pa," said Naruto. "Aye. But do you know what you have to do to become the toad summoner?" countered Fukasaku. "Well, I guess I'd summon toads and maybe be summoned by toads?" ventured Naruto. "Being the toad summoner does entail both those things, yes. But you'd also need to train in order to utilize your chakra." "Now before you ask," said Fukasaku, cutting off Naruto's budding question, "chakra is an energy used to do a lot of things, like summon toads. It's produced by you, me, Ma, and everything else in the world. Since you hold it in your body, you can only have so much of it at a time, and if you run out, you die. One thing I'll be teaching you is how to use the chakra other things make, so you don't run out as easily. It'll be hard, but if you're not up for it, I could always take you to the Hidden Leaf Village." "No way, Pa. If I can be even a bit as cool as old Bunta, I'll work super duper hard," said Naruto excitedly. "Alright then. I figured you say that. We'll start with some meditation," said Fukasaku, pulling out a small stick from his cloak. "Try not to move." "I think I've got it, Pa, Fukasaku-sensei," said Naruto as excitedly as one can while not moving at all. He winced and reached up to rub the back of his head after the stick came down for referring to his sensei as Pa. This training was going to be a pain. "I'm impressed. Getting a grasp on sage mode at such a young age is a feat to be sure. Meeting a young-un who can stay still at all is rare enough, but sensing and then absorbing natural chakra is near impossible. You shouldn't have the reserves to do anything of the sort," said Fukasaku, bringing his stick back into his cloak. "Well, I am quite impressive. The one who does impossible things, I like the sound of that. I dare say I might even be better than you were back in the day. When was that day, 100 years ago? Said the 6-year-old, soaking up the praise like a sponge. To take it back. You aren't quite mature or wise enough to be called a sage yet. More like a junior sage, quipped Fukasaku. Hey, I'm plenty wise enough to be a sage. Besides, I've mastered sage mode, so there's no way I can't be a sage, said Naruto, confident in his logic. Oh ho ho, Master De. I'd say you have a ways to go before you've mastered sage mode. What kind of enemy would let his opponent sit there and charge up energy for 10 minutes? As it is now, your sage mode is useless in combat, said Fukasaku. Well, what else can I do, huh? You said it yourself, one must be absolutely still when gathering natural chakra, or risk losing control and joining these poor fools who tried and failed, said Naruto, gesturing to the surrounding statues of toads in meditative poses, those who had failed their sage mode training and paid the price. Yes, one must be still when gathering natural chakra, but not when using it. And it's child's play for one sage to give natural chakra to another sage. Using a technique I developed for just such a use, the sage art, amphibian technique, Shima and I can fuse with you. We gather the natural chakra while you do the fighting in sage mode. Pretty useful, huh? Said Fukasaku, obviously pleased with himself for creating such an amazing technique. Meanwhile, Naruto was imagining what a fusion of himself and Fukasaku would look like, his mind conjuring monstrosity after monstrosity for it to be horrified by. Seeing the look on his face, Fukasaku quickly explained. It's not an equal fusion. It mostly looks like we're just sitting on your shoulders. Naruto let out the breath he had been holding in relief. Fukasaku quickly jumped on his shoulder and began the technique. It didn't last long as the small toad was violently ejected from his perch. Fukasaku picked himself up and began thinking as to why his wonderful technique had failed so catastrophically. He came up with nothing and decided to try again, brushing off Naruto's concern for his well-being. Upon attempting the amphibian technique again, the jutsu seemed to work as intended for an instant. I refused to share this cage with some pathetic little frog. Out. And the instant was gone, as Fukasaku was launched across the clearing once again. This time, however, he had a much clearer idea of what had gone wrong. Pa! Are you okay? Asked Naruto in concern. Yes. Yes, I'm fine. Tell me, Naruto, what do you know about the 9 tails? Said Fukasaku, brushing himself off. Isn't that the story you used to tell me when I was a baby about the last toad summoner? Asked Naruto, wondering why Fukasaku was bringing up a fairy tale from before Naruto could remember. I'm afraid it's much more than a fairy tale. Minato died fighting the beast, but you can't kill a tailed beast. He was forced to seal it. But that kind of power can't be sealed into just anything. It had to have an active chakra system. And to top it off, he had to seal it into someone whose chakra system hadn't fully developed so that they could assimilate both the 9 tails and the seal. He sealed the 9 tails into you, said Fukasaku. It's the 9 tails that's rejecting the amphibian technique. I'm afraid that you won't be able to use sage mode. I realize this must be a lot to take in, but the toads and I think nothing less of you. This is... Stop, interrupted Naruto, his hair shadowing his eyes. This fox is nothing, shouted Naruto, his eyes full of determination. I won't let this stupid fox dictate what I can and can't do. If I can't fuse with you to use sage mode, then I'll just learn to use sage mode while moving. What? That's impossible. Gathering natural chakra, whose entire purpose is to be gathered while still, while moving, is impossible. It can't be done, said Fukasaku in disbelief. Before you, sage mode was next to useless. You invented the amphibian technique, I'll invent something to gather natural chakra while moving, said Naruto determinedly. Fukasaku's eyes widened before he smiled a devious smirk. All right. If anyone can do it, it's you. But I don't want you trying this without me nearby to knock the natural chakra out of you. Let's do this, yelled Naruto. Are you sure about this, Naruto? You just recently learned to use sage mode efficiently, said Shima worriedly. Ma, please. I may have just finished, but I'm better at sage mode than either of you. I can't learn any more here. I want to see the world and find others like me, said Naruto. 6 years had passed since he had first learned to absorb natural chakra and enter sage mode. The 12-year-old still had his bright yellow hair, but now his eyes were a golden yellow with bar-like pupils and natural chakra showing itself as orange markings around his eyes. The boy's right, Ma. He's surpassed both of us at the technique, but he's still too inexperienced to be a true sage. Real-world experience is the only way to fix that, Fukasaku agreed. Well, I suppose as long as he summons us whenever he gets in over his head, consented Shima. Take this before you go, though. It's reserved for sages of Mount Myobokuzen. Pa doesn't agree that you've reached that mark, but I do. Besides, it might get cold wherever you're going. Naruto took the red cloak with black flames on the bottom reverently and put it on. Shima hadn't lied. The cloak was exceptionally cozy and warm. Naruto quickly said his goodbyes and left Mount Myobokuzen before his tears could catch up to him. Naruto swore then that he would not return to Mount Myobokuzen until he had become a true sage. If only he knew what that would entail. Naruto felt that Shima and Fukasaku had raised him well, and they had. Not only had they taught him right from wrong, they had also taught him more practical things, like numbers and language, manners and etiquette. Naruto had very strict criteria for anything he decided to do. First and foremost, the action in question needed to pose no potential threat to his precious people, currently limited to the toads of Mount Myobokuzen. Secondly, it had to not reveal his status as a Jinchuriki. According to Fukasaku and Shima, Jinchuriki were often mistreated and targeted for the beasts they contained. Unfortunately, having only these criteria to judge potential actions by gave him a lot of options, not all of them good. Which is how he found himself working for a terrorist organization as a ninja for hire. It wasn't all bad. Tasugaru, the organization employing him, had goals which might have been construed as noble, and the pay was definitely good. The idea of liberating the land of woods wasn't something Naruto had a vested interest in, but it wasn't anything too nefarious. Mostly it consisted of Naruto protecting the real rebels from skilled ninja called roots, while Tasugaru destroyed root bases with massive amounts of explosive notes. Naruto had to admit that the root Anbu were skilled, but he wasn't a sage for nothing. He didn't summon the toads during his skirmishes with root forces to keep from being mistaken for Jiraiya of the Sannin, the only other toad summoner. Naruto would keep his anonymity a bit longer. Tasugaru had contacted him after one of his less appealing missions. He had built up as much of a reputation as someone who doesn't want to be noticed can. He had yet to be listed in any bingo books, but his reputation ensured that he never wanted for real. He had yet to encounter another Jinchuriki like himself, but if Fukasaku was telling the truth, hidden villages were rather secretive about their Jinchuriki. Naruto was broken out of his memories by the call of one of the samurai that Tasugaru was composed of. "Hey Naruto. Saji wanted to see you when you get the chance," said one of the approaching rebels. "Thanks Ao, I'll go see what he wanted," replied Naruto, looking up from his meal. He stood up and began walking away to find the leader of Tasugaru. He turned his head back around to face his meal when he was several feet away. Suddenly his tongue shot out of his mouth like a bullet from a gun, and stuck to the last bit of bacon he had been eating. His tongue then shot back into his mouth just as quickly as it had come out, taking the piece of bacon with it. Petra jumped back in shock as the slimy appendage flashed past her face. Naruto jogged off to find Saji. He found the commander of Tasugaru where one might expect, at the map table in the war tent. "Petra said you wanted to see me. Is it a new job?" asked Naruto, cutting straight to the chase. He liked the whole saving a country thing, but he was in this for the pay at the end of the day. "Yes, one last job. We are this close," Saji said, holding up two fingers not even an inch apart to signify just how close they were, to ejecting Danzo's accursed root Anbu from the land of woods, thanks in no small part to you. But their last base is heavily defended. Too heavily defended for any of my men, and probably even you. That's why I've hired some outside help for this one. She came highly recommended as a demolitions expert from a good friend. She should be joining us shortly." Naruto spun around as he sensed something strange. Because Naruto was constantly drawing natural chakra from the environment, he could sense perfectly the location of anything he was taking the chakra of within the considerable range Sage Mode had. The chakra he had sensed now was unlike anything he had ever felt. It was clearly human in nature, but was shaped vaguely like a bird. A very large bird. That said, the chakra was incredibly unstable. Naruto theorized that the new arrival was riding on top of the bird, which was probably a summon, or some similar creature. The unstable chakra could very well be how this demolitions expert demolished. Saji followed Naruto's gaze to see an empty sky. Several minutes passed before a large hawk appeared and continued to grow as it approached them, startlingly white against the blue sky. As the bird drew closer, Naruto noticed a person riding atop the bird, a girl not much older than himself with hair almost as bright a shade of yellow as his. Her hair went halfway down her back and had one large bang covered the left side of her face. She wore a mesh undershirt and a green battle kimono with white trim. As she drew within earshot, the demolitions expert announced her presence. "I'm here for the job with the Tasugaru, yeah? Are you Saji?" she said. "Indeed I am. Are you the Deidara that my friend recommended?" responded Saji. "Of course I am, yeah? So you decided to buy some of my art to cause some havoc? Smart move, yeah," the newly introduced Deidara said. "Art?" asked Naruto, deciding to make his presence known. That's what my ninjutsu is, a noble and refined art, said Deidara, holding up a small clay spider in her hand, which oddly enough had a mouth embedded in it, teeth, tongue, and all. Look! Such refined lines, and a form that pursues two-dimensional deform. This is art. But that's not all there is to my art. My creations flow, yeah. Like this, it's simply molded clay. But my art explodes. And when it explodes it becomes sublime, and for the first time, the essence of my creation appears, yeah. That instant of sublimation is when true art can really exist. True art is an explosion, yeah. Wow, said Naruto, unsure of what to say after Deidara's long-winded speech on art, which apparently explodes. Having never really covered art in Fukasaku's lectures, Naruto's first exposure to art were small clay figures that exploded, which was not exactly the socially accepted standard of the practice. Much as I love explaining art to the uneducated, we should probably have this schmuck leave so you can tell me what needs artistic renovation, said Deidara, gesturing to Naruto as the uneducated in the room. Naruto narrowed his golden eyes in annoyance, but otherwise remained silent, content with letting Zaji explain the situation. Actually, Naruto here will be working with you. Your job will to be destroying the physical structure of this base, the leader of Tasugair said, pointing to the last root base on the map table. Naruto here will be in charge of the personnel in the base. Can you two handle it? I don't know about this guy, so don't come crying to me if he ends up as an artistic smear on the ground, said Deidara offhandedly. Naruto glared over at her. If you can so much as scratch me with your art, I'll give you my entire paycheck for this job. The two blondes slammed their foreheads together, glaring lighting over the short distance. I'll take that as a yes, said Zaji good-naturedly. I'll leave you to it. Remember though, if the job isn't finished you won't get paid. Yeah, no problem, said Naruto before he hopped into the trees, Deidara close behind on a clay bird. Torian would be frustrated if Lord Danzo's harsh training hadn't removed all emotion from him. He had been sent to this backwoods country to quell a rebellion that only should have taken 20 root ANBU to stop. This Tasugair didn't even have a single ninja among them. Torian and Fu had personally made sure that the Land of Woods ninja clans were wiped out. No, Lord Danzo's elite root ninja were fighting samurai and losing. While they didn't have a single ninja, Ryo was no object to the surprisingly well-funded rebellion. Torian couldn't even be angry to the missing ninja that the Land of Woods had hired, both because he literally couldn't, and because even missing ninja had to earn money. This of course did not translate to mercy when in combat. The mission comes first after all. And it was because of those same missing ninja that Torian had been assigned to this pathetic little assignment in the middle of nowhere, when he would be of more use serving Lord Danzo back in the Hidden Leaf. Torian had tried to muster the forces and just end this charade already so he could return to Lord Danzo's side, but Tasugair had apparently hired some rather competent ninja. Torian was just thinking over how he would lure them out when the ceiling shook. Realizing that this either meant an enemy attack or an earthquake, Torian was forced to make a quick decision. If it was an enemy attack, they would want to stick to the base, but remaining underground during an earthquake would kill them all as surely as an army of enemy ninja. Deciding that the rebels couldn't have the kind of firepower required to make him feel the shock several dozen feet below the earth, Torian quickly ordered his fellow root members out of the subterranean base. As Torian arrived at the entrance to the commandeered base, he noticed that the others had yet to exit the doors. What seems to be the issue? Asked Torian in his typical monotone. Sir, one of the sensors detected several large chakra sources outside. We determined that they are the source of the tremors. Awaiting further orders, informed one of the more experienced root members on the squad in a tone of voice indistinguishable from Torian's. Just as Torian about to order the squads back to defensive positions to repel the enemies, the doors crashed inwards and crushed several less alert root members. Torian was down to only himself and 7 other root. Although, Torian couldn't blame the 2 dead root members for being crushed by the large metal doors. The doors had been reinforced by a dual iron bar seal. Anyone capable of destroying them, even with repeated barrage, was a not force to trifle with. Before the dust could clear, what appeared to be a long tongue shot out of the cloud of debris and hit one of his remaining root in the chest. The tongue immediately retreated back into the dust cloud. Make that 6 root and be left, thought Torian as despondently as someone without emotions can. The almost sad feeling changed to not quite surprise when the root member dragged into the dust came flying out a moment later at phenomenal speeds, leaving a massive crater in the wall he was embedded in. Torian reassured himself with the thought that no matter how strong the individual was, one touch would be enough to end him. As Torian shed his gloves and shirt, his skin took on a vibrant shade of purple, not exactly as stealthy as one would like for a profession based on sneaking around. Of course, that didn't matter since if Torian had taken off his shirt and gloves, he wasn't trying to be stealthy. The time had come to die for the mission if needed. Wow, only 10 enemies. When Zaji said that this base was well defended, I thought he was serious," said their mystery attacker as he stepped out of the settling dust cloud. "I don't even need Daidara's help on this." Torian took in the attacker. His blonde hair stood out in stark contrast to the Root ANBU's standard creme-colored cloaks and blank white masks. His red cloak with black flames licking at the bottom certainly would have impressed on most people how cool this individual was, but none of the Root ANBU were impressed. But the strangest thing about him was his eyes. They were a dull gold, with bar-like pupils, and his eyes were surrounded by what appeared to be orange eyeshadow. Perhaps some kind of bloodline? Regardless, he would be colored purple by the end of this. That was when his accomplice arrived. Another blonde with equally bright hair. Her eyes were blue, or at least the one Torian could see was. The large owl she was on, however, was white. What nearly irritated him was the fact that Tassigare had sent 2 children, no older than 13, to face down experienced Root ANBU. Based on the insults flying between the two of them, they weren't even a cohesive team. He took the time given to him by the 2 allies arguing to send a nonverbal plan to his teammates with the Root ANBU hand-signed code. This was exactly why he didn't understand how emotions could ever be an asset on the battlefield. By arguing, they had given their enemies enough time to plot against them. Root ANBU never disobeyed an order, even when it involved attacking an unknown opponent to discern their strength. Which is what one of them did, swinging his tanto at the first blonde's exposed back while another ran at the female. The 2 of them stopped bickering to throw up their right hands. That's when Torian knew Root would be walking away from this fight in pain, if at all. The Root ANBU behind the female exploded. One of the remaining Root members signaled his observations from his better viewpoint. He had seen a small white blur jump from the girl's hand. That had most likely been some sort of explosive that had killed Root member number 4. In contrast, no one had an explanation for what had killed Root member number 5. He had been several feet away from the red-clad blonde's fist, but had gone flying back as if Tsunade herself had punched him in the face. Torian decided to take the male blonde, and signaled the other 4 Root ANBU to take out the female. Torian ran at his opponent as the other Root members moved at the same time. The white owl that the female was standing on flapped its wings and took to the sky, exiting the base as the Root members followed. The first blonde made the mistake of looking at his comrade leaving, taking his eyes off of Torian in the process. The last mistake he'll ever make, thought Torian as he went to punch his opponent in across the exposed skin of the face. Instead of the fist making contact, the blonde reached up and caught the punch in a palm that didn't give an inch. What startled Torian was the fact that his opponent hadn't looked in his direction at all. "I'm kind of insulted that I was only deemed worthy of one opponent," said the red-clad child. "I mean, it's not like I haven't what?" Torian grinned as he saw that his opponent wasn't wearing gloves. Even among the Aburame, Torian had been unique. He commanded a swarm of microscopic insects that inhabited his body. Through physical contact, he could infect his opponents with these insects, which were poisonous to everyone but himself. The insects would feed off the chakra of their opponents like regular parasitic insects, but the poison killed them far faster than chakra exhaustion. The poison would take longer to spread if it started in the hand, and the limb could be amputated to remove the poison, but Torian had more or less one. Still, one didn't become one of Lord Danzo's most trusted by taking risks and assuming things. Torian swept out his tanto for a quick slice to the neck for the kill. His tanto made clean contact, but somehow failed to penetrate the skin. Not only that, the tanto shattered as if it were made of glass. Torian jumped back as his opponent went to punch him in the stomach. Rather than follow through, the blonde was staring at his left hand in what Torian imagined horror would look like as it slowly turned purple. He had won. Then the strangest thing began to happen. The purple skin began to turn stone gray from the original point of contact and quickly spread, overtaking the microscopic insects. The poison had only spread halfway up the forearm before it stopped entirely. The blonde angrily wrung his gray hand with his right hand, breaking a thin layer of actual stone that had formed over his left hand and forearm. "Don't you know? Natural chakra is dangerous," said the blonde as he rushed through seals faster than anyone his age had any right to. He raised the final ram sign to his mouth and spewed forth a mass of yellow liquid. Torian jumped over the stream of the most peculiar water style he had ever seen, when he smelled it. This stream wasn't yellow water, but oil. The blonde seemed to know this as well, as he tossed an explosive note into the stream. It was quickly absorbed into the stream, and the moment the child stopped spitting the oil, it exploded. Luckily, Torian had managed to use some ninja wire from his front pouches to get away from the explosion, but the explosion was enormous, and engulfed the room. The inferno caught up to Torian quickly. He fell to the ground wreathed in flames before performing the replacement technique to switch with a log. Any normal ninja would try all the harder to overcome this foe, but ninja trained as Root ANBU weren't governed by their emotions. Torian knew when to cut his losses and inform Lord Danzo of his discoveries. Torian performed the body flicker technique to put as much distance between himself and the much stronger rogue ninja that had attacked the base and, presumably, killed the other 9 root members. He had put enough distance between himself and the base that he felt safe tree jumping instead of using the body flicker. He was glad. The body flicker was known to aggravate injuries received, and he had suffered painful burns across his body. As he jumped from tree to tree, he noticed a large, white spider on one of the tree limbs he jumped past. Almost as if it responded to him noticing it, the spider jumped from its perch and latched onto his face. Right before the spider exploded, Torian heard the last words he would hear. "With this, become art. Katsu." Deidara supposed her temporary partner wasn't completely useless. Sure, he knocked down the doors to the enemy base, thereby alerting everyone in said base to their presence, but he had also led her to the last of the root guys. Plus, if the burns all over the last guy's body were anything to go by, Naruto wasn't as hopeless as she had initially though when it came to art. Right now they were flying back to the Tassigare HQ to receive their rewards on her replacement mount, a large clay hawk. Her owl had served her well, but it had finally achieved its artful purpose when it exploded in the faces of her enemies. As they drew closer, Naruto's eye snapped open in alarm. Deidara had noticed that at the very least, he was a reliable sensor with a massive range, so when he told her to hurry to the Tassigare base, she did. Upon arriving at the base, the 2 young blondes found the base in ruins, tents aflame and corpses littering the ground. While the 2 didn't care too much for the rebels, their payment was another matter entirely. They landed to see if anything was left for them to take as collateral from their late employer. Standing in the middle of what used to be the main gathering place was one person. He stood tall and regal, as if the grime of the battlefield wouldn't dare touch him. His orange hair blew slightly in the wind, but the piercings across his face distracted from even the strange hair color. The other striking thing about him was the cloak he wore. It went from a high collar down to his ankles, colored black accented by blood-red clouds on the outside while the inside was the same color as the clouds. Just his very presence made the 2 blonde believe they couldn't take him on, even together. Naruto was the first to overcome the presence of the man who had apparently rendered this carnage upon the Tassigare camp without obtaining as much as a scratch. "Who are you?" he managed to stammer out past the lump in his throat. The orange-haired man looked the 2 blondes in the eyes, and they saw for the first time the purple ripples that his eyes seemed to be made of. "I am God. I am the one who will bring peace to this pathetic world. I am Pain," introduced the man, apparently known as Pain. While his claim to be God was ridiculous, something about the way he carried himself and the power he exuded made Naruto believe him. "I am the leader of a group known as Akatsuki, comprised of a select group of powerful individuals. We cooperate for our own purposes, but my ultimate goal is to bring peace to this world. I am offering the 2 of you a place within the organization," continued Pain in a tone that brokered no argument. Naruto was terrified, but he had to know. "How do you plan to bring about peace?" "I'm all for it, but I won't follow a man. Peace shall be achieved through the Jinchuriki, or more specifically, the tailed beasts. Akatsuki shall control them to create an era of peace," said Pain with absolute conviction. "Will you stand alongside us?" Naruto looked at Deidara and the 2 nodded to each other in unison. "Yes," they said simultaneously. They would follow this god, this Pain. Naruto and Deidara worked together as a 2 ninja team in the coming years. They had donned the Akatsuki cloak and placed the ring on their fingers. They had met the other members of Akatsuki, and while each was powerful in their own right, none commanded the area around them as much as Akatsuki's leader, Pain. But their adventures in Akatsuki are a tale for another time. For 3 years after their induction into the ranks of legends, another young ninja begins his journey to become a legend. Iruka Umino was one of the few ninja that was entirely content with where he was in life. He had achieved the rank of Chunin and become a teacher of the next generation of ninja in the Hidden Leaf Village. While he was originally unsure about being entrusted with such an important duty, some support from his best friend Mizuki had reassured him concerning his abilities. After that small hurdle, the 2 friends were ready to teach to the young genin to be. If only they would stay awake in class. Having had enough, Iruka threw an eraser at one of the repeat offenders. The blue-haired academy student groggily came to his senses as the eraser connected. "Sora, perhaps you could tell us what type of jutsu the legendary Sannin all use?" asked Iruka, hoping to teach the kid a lesson about paying attention. "How the hell should I know? Aren't you the teacher? If you're asking a student for help, maybe someone needs to tell the Hokage about the low quality of the teachers here," responded Sora sarcastically. Iruka sighed. Sora was always rude, even to people he liked. Not that he had many that liked him, having the 9 tails sealed inside him. While the beast had strangely disappeared after its attack 16 years ago, it had resurfaced inside Sora 7 years later. It had taken all 12 of the Guardian Ninja to defeat the beast. When the dust cleared, only 4 people were left alive, one of them being a 2-year-old Sora. Those in the class didn't know why Sora's right hand was bandaged, but those who were there years ago knew of the beast-like arm. Regardless, Irika was a teacher first, so Sora would be a student first, not a beast. You would know, because it's what the class has been covering for the last 10 minutes. Maybe if you were awake, you would know that. Sakura, what jutsu are all of the Sannin known for? Interrupted Mizuki, who had far less sympathy for Sora. That would be the summoning technique, began the pink-haired girl. Jiraiya summons toads, Orochimaru summons snakes, and Lady Tsunade summons slugs. It said that. Nerd! Interrupted Sora in a very loud and obnoxious manner. Sora! Detention! Bellowed Irika, the force from his voice seemingly pushing Sora's hair back like gale force winds. Sora's head was back on the desk snoring away within the hour. Sora had tried to escape out the window immediately after class had been dismissed, but Irika had noticed and grabbed the wayward student for his punishment. Sora was in the process of carrying logs into the exam room for the replacement technique portion of the exams tomorrow. You know, Sora, your grades as they are won't be able to cushion a failing grade on any portion of the exam tomorrow. Even Shikamaru's grades are higher than yours, said Irika matter-of-factly. So what, you think I can't make the cut, hubbub? Retaliated Sora. What was that? Said Irika menacingly, not taking kindly to a student calling him names. Bud. I said bud. Like pal, friend, amigo, comrade, mate, chum, exclaimed Sora hurriedly to try and avoid any more punishment. Irika sighed at his student's attempt to save himself from the self-dug hole. It's not that you can't make the cut. You have the potential to be one of the best ninja of your generation. But you won't be a ninja of your generation at all if you don't try your best tomorrow. It's not a threat, just a warning from teacher to student, explained Irika. You don't have to pretend to care. I'm used to it, said Sora angrily. I'm not pretending, Sora, began Irika. I really do. Looks like I'm done with the posts. See ya tomorrow, said Sora as he jumped out of the window to escape the caring teacher. Sora knew what happened when he got close to people. They got hurt or hurt him. Sora had decided long ago to go without friends, no matter how lonely he got. Sora's next human contact came hours later, as he was napping in one of the trees near the memorial stone. The man appeared to be in his early 30s and carried a large staff on his back. He had the sides of his head shaven, leaving brown hair on only the top of his head. His Jonin flak jacket was worn with pride, though even more prominently displayed was the waistcloth adorned with the kanji for fire. Sora recognized him as Kitane, one of the 3 surviving members of the 12 Guardian Ninja. He waited for Sora to acknowledge his presence before speaking. Didn't your teacher recommend studying? I'm not sure sleeping in trees will be on the test tomorrow, said the lightning user. Doesn't matter. Everyone hates me for whatever reason. I doubt they'd let me be a ninja, even if I was the best in the class, said Sora bitterly. I knew your father, began Kitane, putting up his hand to stop the question on Sora's tongue. His name was Kazuma, and he was one of my comrades. Wait, does that mean my dad was one of the 12 Guardian Ninja? Exclaimed Sora, stunned by this new information. Why did no one ever tell me? Only Asuma, Chiriku, and I know. Asuma served the feudal lord until recently. He probably forgot you were still around. You can't blame Chiriku either. He lives at the fire temple up in the mountains doing monk stuff. You were 2 when he died. I thought you were old enough to remember, and for that I apologize. Only recently did I hear that you had no idea, said Kitane, his voice drenched in sorrow for leaving a friend's son without the knowledge of his father. Sora was still speechless when Kitane spoke up again. Though if I knew Kazuma, he wouldn't want his only son to fail the academy exams. If you manage to pass the test tomorrow, I managed to get an old friend to agree to take you as his student. Did he know my father? Asked Sora, desperate for any more information about the father he never knew. Asuma and Kazuma were as good of friends as they come. I was never too close to Kazuma, shrugged Kitane. But Asuma probably knows what his favorite flavor of ramen was. If anyone could tell you more, it would be Asuma. Wow, said Sora, thoroughly awed. I'm definitely gonna pass that test tomorrow, believe it, exclaimed Sora excitedly. Hold up, said Kitane, holding up his hands to emphasize his point. Asuma did say you had to pass one test to prove that you're more than just Kazuma's son. Asuma wants to see if you're Kazuma's heir. What does that mean? Asked Sora, torn between being furious that there was a catch and confused as to what Kitane meant. Like I said earlier, Asuma hasn't heard of you since he's been in the capital this whole time. He trusts me, but he wants to make sure. There's a technique known only by your father and Asuma. He wants to see if you can pull it off. It isn't a complicated technique, but Asuma has the only remaining scroll detailing how to use it. But we both want you to succeed, so I'll tell you where he keeps it. Sora was too ecstatic to have heard about his father, and have the hope of more to notice anything suspicious. Sora was having a great day ever since Kitane had talked to him. Asuma's apartment had been a piece of cake to break into. The scroll had been somewhat hard to find, but Kitane's instructions hadn't led him wrong, and he had headed out of the village to one of the training ground in the woods. He had forgotten the specific training ground in the excitement of learning a new jutsu on top of finding out about his father. Sora figured he'd see if this Asuma was all that. If he couldn't find Sora practicing a destructive jutsu in the woods, Sora would get all the info about Kazuma he could and train under someone more competent. But deep down, Sora was just too happy to care about anything beyond learning about his father. Sora cracked open the scroll and began to read about the flying swallow. After several hours of practice, Sora was feeling like Kitane had lied to him. This jutsu wasn't easy at all. Channeling chakra was difficult enough, but wind chakra was proving to be impossible. He had been at it for hours, and the claw marks from his weapon were strewn around the clearing he was training in. Sora decided to take a short break to recover his chakra. He didn't pay attention in class all the time ever, but Irika made sure a blind, deaf, and dumb worm learned the dangers of chakra exhaustion. Sora didn't exactly know what chakra exhaustion felt like, but he was kinda tired and had been using a lot of chakra, so he assumed that it counted. After a short time, Sora did what he did best: sleep. I wasn't sure what to think when Kazuma's son decided to try and steal from a Jonin's place of residence in broad daylight. Sora awoke to a deep voice. If the military police were still around, you'd be sleeping in a jail cell, not a forest. Sora sat up and opened his eyes to take in the new arrival. He wore a Jonin's flak jacket and a leaf forehead protector, identifying him as a ninja. A cigarette hung from his mouth, and his brown hair stretched down from the top of his head to the bottom of his chin in large sideburns and a small goatee. All of this was lost on Sora once he saw the waistcloth with the kanji for fur emblazoned on it, identifying the man as one of the 12 guardian ninja. Other than Kitane, the only living members were Asuma and Chiriku, and since Chiriku was apparently living in some monastery somewhere, this could only be Asuma. Sora was slightly afraid of being punished by the man he had stolen from, but Asuma seemed more amused than angry. I decided to follow the little squirt who thought he could steal from me, set on stopping a potential spy. But I must say, even if you are Kazuma's kid, learning the flying swallow to this degree in such a short time is impressive. Before Sora could respond, 3 poles struck the ground in a triangle around him. Lightning sprung from the staffs, forming an electric blue wall around Sora. Asuma, glad you showed up. Now we can finish this, said Kitane menacingly as he stepped out from under the trees. Finish what? What are you on about? Asked Asuma, confused as to what his old friend was talking about. We can avenge Kazuma. We can kill the 9 tails, said Kitane, a wild look in his eyes. What are you talking about? Asked Sora, even more confused by these proceedings than Asuma. Where does the 9 tails come into any of this? Don't tell me you couldn't figure it out. Your right arm, the hate-filled looks, the mysterious disappearance of the 9 tails. No one knows where the 9 tails went right after the attack all those years ago, but it resurfaced to attack the 12 guardian ninja. Putting 2 and 2 together yet, Sora? Said Kitane as Sora's eyes widened with the realization of what Kitane was implying. Let me spell it out for you. You aren't Kazuma's son, Sora. You just took that form after we defeated you. You are the 9 tails that killed out comrades all those years ago, including Sora's father Kazuma. Nama, Sito too, and I defeated you using limelight long enough for the 3rd Hokage to seal you back up, but that arm is proof that you'll just break that seal soon enough. I set you on learning the flying swallow to exhaust you so Asuma and I could finish you off once and for all. What? What are you talking about, Kitane? My dad might not be the seal master the 4th was, but he knows what he's doing. This is Sora, and if you kill him, the 9 tails he's been holding back all these years like a hero will be released. I took so much sacrifice to stop the beast before, and you'd see that wasted for some misaimed revenge? Asuma spoke in disbelief before drawing 2 trench knives out of his kunai pouch. I'm sorry, Kitane, but I won't let the others have died in vain. Very well then, Asuma. If you aren't with me, then you're against me. Sorry, but you'll have to die alongside the 9 tails, shouted Kitane as he drew another staff from his back, the tip splitting into 3 prongs, lightning arching between them. Meanwhile, Sora was shocked by the deluge of information he was receiving. Kitane hadn't meant a word he said earlier. Kitane hadn't wanted to watch over him, or help him become a ninja. He had just wanted to exhaust Sora for an easy kill, and though Sora was loath to admit it, it had worked. He was dead tired. Asuma's trench knives clashed repeatedly with Kitane's staff. Though the wind chakra coating them gave Asuma the technical advantage, Kitane's staff kept even the elongated knives at a safe distance. And while the wind chakra running their length dispersed the lightning, some still made it down the knives to give Asuma a small jolt. It was nothing in small doses, but the small shocks started to add up. Just give it up, Asuma. Just let me kill the 9 tails. There's no need for us to fight, shouted Kitane over the crackling of the lightning and the howling winds. Not a chance. Asuma shot back, jumping back to try and tip the scales. Asuma's hands flew through the seals and Kitane did likewise. They completed their 2 different techniques at the same time. Fire style, ash pile burning. Lightning style, raging bolt. A large sphere of lightning formed over Kitane's head, crackling with power before hurtling down at Asuma. Asuma spit a large black cloud of smoke at Kitane, and the smoke also covered his own escape. I always knew you were a coward, but this is a new low for you, Asuma. Kitane whirled around in the smoke, searching for Asuma. Suddenly, Asuma spoke up, his voice coming from seemingly every direction. Shame you were always too focused on your berserker charges to notice the end of this jutsu. With that said, an audible click was heard as Asuma hit the flint he had embedded in his tooth ever since Chiriku had chipped it. The resulting spark was enough to expose the smoke for what it actually was, highly flammable gunpowder. The resulting explosion destroyed the area, and for once Sora was glad for the lightning walls surrounding him. Asuma spoke again as the smoke cleared. Looks like you let your guard down at the end. Asuma walked over to Sora's prison and sliced one of the pillars of the lightning field clean in half, ending the technique. Who let his guard down at the end? Lightning style, lightning eruption. What? Exclaimed Asuma as the ground beneath him lit up an electric yellow. Kitane emerged from the remaining smoke, lightly burnt with his staff in shambles, but otherwise unharmed. The electricity from Kitane's technique shot up from the ground, electrocuting Asuma and bringing him to his knees. As it was, he had only remained conscious through copious amounts of wind chakra being pumped through his body. Kitane laughed at his former comrade's sorry state. As if I didn't know what your techniques do. We were comrades for years. Now move aside so I can end the 9 tails. No. Kazuma wouldn't want this, Kitane. Sora isn't the 9 tails. I can't profess to know him intimately, but Sora is Sora, no one else. And Sora is our friend's son. I'll die before I let you kill him. Asuma was shouting by the end, and had tightened his grip on his trenched knives. Well then I'll just kill you first. Lightning style, thunderclap. Lightning began to cover Kitane's hands as he finished the hand seals for his technique. He rushed forward, bringing his arms back to crush Asuma's head like a grape. Sora's eyes widened as he lunged forward. Kitane grinned internally. Sora's desperate slash with his triple-bladed claws would fall a good foot short of Kitane. Kitane adjusted his attack to hit Sora instead of Asuma. The claws passed by harmlessly, and Kitane went in for the kill. Or he would have, if a sharp pain hadn't spread across his chest. That was when Kitane noticed the red chakra coating the blades of Sora's claws, extending a good foot and a half past the end of the claws. Looking down, Kitane noticed the 3 parallel slashes across his chest. He had only a second to marvel at the fact that Sora had managed to learn the flying swallow technique in only a few hours before the more experienced user of the flying swallow struck him square in the chest. Flying swallow, straight line, shouted Asuma as his fist slid around Kitane's chest. Then the ground on the other side of Kitane buckled in the shape of a crescent. Kitane's body fell to the ground in 2 pieces, cut perfectly in half by the blade of wind chakra. Sora looked both awed by the destruction caused by the flying swallow and glad that the liar who had manipulated him was dead. Sora was brought out of his reverie by Asuma's voice. Come on, Sora. As much as I'd love to collapse here and rest, we'd best report this to the Hokage. Sora could only swallow and nod as Asuma started to walk away. Asuma looked over his shoulder at the young blue-haired boy. And good work back there. The flying swallow isn't easy to learn, so good job. Despite all that he had been through, Sora found a grin creeping up on his face. Miles away, 10 shadowy figures gathered atop the fingertips of a massive statue, only their eyes clearly visible through the technique that allowed them all to gather here. The figure atop the right thumb spoke with clear authority. Since we are gathered here, I can only assume that Setsu and Sasori have found the targets. Am I correct? The figure asked, looking over at the left hand with ringed eyes. Indeed, we just located the 9 tails Jinchuriki. He certainly knows how to hide, but we finally got him to use the 9 tails chakra. Yeah, thanks for letting us use that Kitane guy, answered the figure on the little finger of the right hand with 2 distinct voices and a rather unique silhouette. The hunched-over figure on the left thumb of the statue spoke up next in a deep, raspy voice. Well, you're not welcome. That one was a useful spy, not that he knew. But desperate times call for desperate measures. The Nine Tails has certainly kept us waiting, and I hate waiting. Now that we have identified the targets, it will be up to you to gather them. Wait until the beast before yours has been captured to move, but once that requirement is met, take as much time as you will. It will make little difference. But do not strike in a way to draw attention. Akatsuki must remain in the shadows a bit longer if we are to succeed in blinding the world with our light. Spoke the figure on the right thumb. I'm just surprised you managed to find him at all. He's successfully evaded the two best spy masters on the continent for over 15 years. Good job, said the figure that stood on the left little finger, as his golden eyes hid a mixture of relief and confusion. We are Akatsuki, spoke a female voice from the right middle finger. The only time we do not do good jobs is when we do perfect jobs. Collect the information on your targets. We start with the 7 tails. Dismissed. With those final words from the leader, the shadowy figures faded into nothingness and the demonic statue slipped into the ground, leaving no evidence that anyone had ever been there. So let me get this straight. We're going to waltz into the most heavily defended hidden village in the world in full Akatsuki regalia, drop hints about how we're looking for the 9 tails Jinchuriki, and no one will care? Asked Deidara in disbelief after hearing her partner's master plan. People will care, that's the point. Nabbing the Jinchuriki on an irregular mission to God knows where or Lord forbid in the village is suicide. Spoke the young sage. This way, they give him a couple of protectors and ship him off somewhere hidden so we don't wreck the village if we tried to get him that way. Which we won't, because as strong as we are, no one can take on an entire hidden village, let alone the hidden leaf. Contrary to his statement, Naruto could think of 6 people who could probably pull off the feat he claimed to be impossible. Besides, leader gave us permission to put Akatsuki on the map. If some people see us, it's no big deal. Look, my art could probably level a city, but stealth and kidnappings are not my strong suit, yeah, said Deidara, loath to admit that her art had any shortcomings. That's why you're partnered with me. My jutsu are based around small-scale damage with varying levels of lethality. You just make sure the Jinchuriki doesn't start a full transformation. My summons don't like to be called for tailed beast emergencies, said Naruto, both to reassure Deidara and fill the time with idle chatter. Speaking of which, I've never actually seen you summon anything before. What even is your summoning contract? Asked Deidara, more than willing to oblige Naruto's unspoken request for conversation. The response was cut off by Naruto's abrupt halt. He stuck out his hand to signal a stop. We're here, said Naruto as he began running through several hand seals. Where is here exactly? This is just some random clearing. The hidden leaf is just about a mile ahead. Let's just go ahead and get this brilliant plan of yours over and done, said Deidara. Despite her frustration, she didn't go past Naruto. She had learned over the years that his sensory abilities were surpassed by none except Setsu in pain. When he said to stop, you stopped, even if it was in the middle of the woods for no discernible reason. Naruto finished his seals and put his right hand on Deidara's chest, while his left hand took a place on his chest. Just as Deidara was about to call him out for feeling her up, a sealing matrix spread out from Naruto's hands, running across her body before fading. Okay, what was that, yeah? Asked Deidara, thoroughly confused by her partner's actions. The hidden leaf is surrounded by a sealed dome, which alerts a team of highly trained ninja about anyone unauthorized entering the city. It doesn't pick up low chakra levels, so trade is fairly unrestricted. And all leaf headbands have a small seal inside to allow entrance to the village, so their own ninja can pass inside with no problem, informed Naruto. If there's some all-seeing sealed dome around the village, how come I've never heard of it? Asked Deidara. Because it's a ninja village, responded Naruto simply. They keep secrets. Then how did you find out about it, yeah? Asked Deidara, now just annoyed at her partner. I sensed it easily enough. It's drawing enough natural chakra to turn my even me into stone. But I still wouldn't have a clue what the heck it was if Itachi hadn't told me beforehand, responded Naruto, answering every question posed to him with a calm that betrayed his young age. You and that Uchiha, it's weird, yeah? You think you were partners with that jerk instead of with me, the way you two get along. Though I must admit, those Sharingan are pretty. Not art level, but they're up there, said Deidara as Naruto laughed at his partner's antics. Let's go then. I hear the ramen in the hidden leaf is wonderful, said Naruto, his toad-like eyes glowing with anticipation. Bleg. It's always ramen with you. We're eating some real food this time, yeah? Let's try to find a dango stand, said Deidara as the two walked into the village proper, drawing some strange looks from the guards for their strange attire and obscuring hats. That's even less of a meal than ramen is. At least my suggestion isn't dessert. Deadpan Naruto. Any better ideas that soggy noodles or delicious sweets? Asked an annoyed Deidara. Ramen for lunch then dango for dessert? Ventured Naruto tentatively. Deal. The two teenage members of Akatsuki finished their lunch without event, if one ignored the simply insane amounts of ramen Naruto consumed within the time it took Deidara to finish a single bowl. Deidara decided to throw Naruto under the bus if Kakuzu asked why they had spent more than the allotted amount on this mission. Which of course would happen, since Kakuzu's allotted amount practically had them paying him out of pocket, as opposed to them actually getting money out of the tall bounty hunter. Deidara looked around and was annoyed to see that her absent-minded following of her partner had led them not to a dango stand, but to the outskirts of the village alongside a small waterway. What's the big idea, yeah? I was looking forward to those sweets, asked Deidara, only acting annoyed. She knew that Naruto never did anything without reason, even if it wasn't always a good one. I thought we might want to eat after dealing with the rats that have been following us, hoping we'd drop something, said Naruto with a meaningful glance over his shoulder. Two figures jumped out of the trees and landed several yards away from the Akatsuki partners. One of them was a tall man with beard and a cigarette hanging out of his mouth, while the other was a beautiful woman who was wearing more bandages than actual dress. The first to speak was the man. Who are you? And what business do you have in the leaf? He inquired, hands twitching towards his kunai pouch. We're simply artists and collectors. We were looking for quite the rare piece here in the leaf. Once we heard it might be here, we came as soon as we were able. After all, there are only 9 pieces like it in the world, said Naruto smoothly. He was referring to the Jinchuriki, hoping that these jonin could pick up on the hint. Unfortunately, he appeared to have overestimated them. What if we don't believe you? Asked the female, hands moving into a more practical position for hand seals as her chakra built up. Oh, for the love of God, yeah. Let's just get this over with, shouted Deidara as she removed her hat. Naruto sighed as the slashed rock forehead protector gleamed in the light. We're here looking for the 9 tails. Hand him over, and we won't level this place. Deidara, need I remind you we're here to gather information, not start a war. Let me handle this, chided Naruto as he removed his own hat. He turned his eyes to the side briefly as he sensed a small chakra level retreating. He had almost missed it next to the 2 jonin flaring their chakra right next to him, but natural chakra missed nothing. He turned his attention to the 2 hidden leaf ninja before him. So if you could just tell us where he is, we'll leave with no trouble. Sora isn't in the village at the moment, but he won't be around when he gets back, so don't worry. The man pulled out 2 small knives as he dashed forward that seemed harmless enough, but Naruto could see the chakra rolling off of them in waves. He blocked the first one with his Sage Mode enhanced forearm, but the wind chakra still managed to leave a small cut. Naruto didn't dwell on it, however, and quickly grabbed the jonin's other fist, leaving another shallow cut on his palm, to prevent his opponent from forming any seals. Naruto had to appreciate the chakra blades that would have certainly bisected a normal human, and he was grateful for his diamond-hard skin. He pulled his opponent and brought his knee to the man's gut, driving the wind from him like a ton of bricks. Naruto stepped behind his foe and raised his hand to deliver the finishing blow when his hand was stopped by the branches of a tree that had grown from the stones behind him. Naruto linked the obvious genjutsu with the flaring chakra from the woman from before. Once he recognized it, Naruto broke the genjutsu without even trying thanks to the natural chakra constantly flooding his chakra system. By simply changing the rate at which he absorbed natural chakra, Naruto could break all but the strongest genjutsu. However, Naruto heeded his own advice to Deidara. They did need someone to actually spread the word of their search for the 9 tails so they could make an attempt when the hidden leaf tried to move the Jinchuriki to a safer location. Naruto was so engrossed with his thoughts he almost missed the kunai that the woman drove into his neck. Almost. One didn't have perfect chakra sensing and missed that. The kunai glanced off his Sage Mode enhanced skin, much to the woman's surprise. Naruto brought his hand down to grip the woman's wrist before flipping her over his shoulder. His left hand went to punch her in midair and send her flying. But before he could make contact, she exploded in a shower of flower petals. The male jonin used his position on the ground to attempt a leg sweep, but was grimaced in pain when his kick connected with what felt like a brick wall. The Akatsuki member didn't move an inch as the leaf jonin retreated to regroup. Naruto didn't need to. He had worked with Deidara long enough to know how long it took to prepare a piece of art. Deidara now, said Naruto as he turned his back on his opponents to jump onto the white bird that rose from the walkway behind him. Deidara grinned as she threw her hands out at the 2-leaf ninja. 2 small white birds with 4 wings apiece flew swiftly at the duo. Katsu! Deidara was annoyed at the lack of art that accompanied her shout of creation. Instead of an artistic smear on the ground, 2 hounds made of lightning were chewing on her clay creations like chewed toys before they dispersed into the air. The 2 jonin that Naruto had effectively manhandled had been joined by a third that was helping them to their feet. The newcomer had a head of spiky silver hair and wore both a mask and a headband over his left eye, leaving only his right eye exposed. Deidara wasn't too mad about the destruction of her art though. She had left a surprise for the man who had managed to draw blood from Naruto, a feat even her art hadn't accomplished. As the duo flew away, a segmented centipede rose from the ground and wrapped itself around the bearded Jonin. The lightning user channeled his element into his right hand and sliced the centipede from top to bottom. And other one of her creations would have been shorted out by the electrical interference, but this art was actually many small pieces that acted independently. The portions that had been cut in half by their weakness didn't detonate, but the lower ones that had yet to be touched exploded with all the glory Deidara had come to expect from her art. Shikamaru and Choji were in a hurry. Sure, Sora was an abrasive jerk, but he was a fellow member of Team 10. Asuma had been rushed to the hospital, unconscious with his legs a mangled mess, so it was up to them to help warn Sora of these Akatsuki people that wanted him dead. It hadn't taken long for Shikamaru to find out that Sora had left with Jiraiya of the Sannin to find Tsunade of the Sannin, both to become the next Hokage and heal the previous Hokage, who had fallen into a coma after his fight against the fourth Kazekage. The attempted invasion of the Hidden Sand had been painful, but not devastating by any means. The Hidden Leaf would recover. Shikamaru knew that there were certain people that would want revenge, but he also knew that no one wanted to spark another war. Both sides had lost enough already. Further conflict would just drag in the other nations. Shikamaru had found out from his father that the targeted duo was starting their search in Tanzaku Town, a small tourist community not too far from the hidden village. He had no doubts that Jiraiya could handle himself, but the element of surprise had killed many ninja before the legendary Sannin, and would kill many after. If he knew about the threat, half the battle was already won. The two friends arrived at Tanzaku Town and were simply overwhelmed by the sheer hustle and bustle of the city. The Hidden Leaf was just a large, but it was designed around utility and defense, not as a massive advertisement. The two decided to split up and search for Jiraiya and Sora separately to speed things up. Shikamaru figured that if they were found by the Akatsuki, 2 genin would be little more threat than 1. The only hope they had was to find Jiraiya before Akatsuki. It had been a while since Jiraiya had seen the small toad on his windowsill. The tiny red creature had told him that it possessed crucial information, but would only reveal it if the Sannin caught it and bought the toad candy. The toad then jumped off the windowsill and began hopping like mad through the city. It took Jiraiya several seconds to process what had just happened. Jiraiya had never met this particular toad, and so had no way to simply summon him back. And so the great Sannin, toad sage of Mount Myobokuzan, the man men want to be and women want, was reduced to chasing a toad the size of his fist around the town like a genin on his first D rank. He had told the tag-along kid that Asuma had sent with him to book a room at the hotel, and Jiraiya was almost glad to be away from the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki's incessant whining. Or he would be, if this accursed toad wasn't so darn fast. Naruto and Deidara hovered above Tanzaku Town, doing lazy circles on the clay hawk. Naruto had yet to meet the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki himself, but he assumed he simply had to find the biggest chakra source in the city and find its source. The two largest in the city were actually fairly close in size, but they were traveling together, so Naruto could only assume that these travelers were the Jinchuriki and its protector. Once Deidara described the two to him courtesy of some long-range reconnaissance from the camera-like device over her left eye, Naruto recognized the younger as the Jinchuriki Sasori and Zetsu had found, while the older was Jiraiya of the Sannin, the only other toad summoner. It had been a clever plan, in Naruto's opinion, to lure Jiraiya away with the Gamakichi by promising snacks should he distract the Sannin for long enough. It was almost too easy, which is why something had to go wrong. He really couldn't even blame anyone but himself. He had focused a bit too much on making sure that their entrance didn't destroy half the city, and so had dismissed the two relatively small chakra signatures that were quickly approaching the target. The 3 immortals of Akatsuki would never let him live down such a rookie mistake, even if he was still technically a rookie. The approach had gone smoothly enough. They had descended, no one paying them any more attention than they would any other bird. They had entered the hotel through the window of an adjacent room. Naruto entered the hotel proper, while Deidara remained at the window to give pursuit should the Jinchuriki attempt to flee out of the window. The 2 young Akatsuki members had decided to stick it to their superiors by capturing one of their targets first, only several miles from the nearest hidden village to top it all off. Of course, any prolonged conflict would bring both the wrath of the Hidden Leaf and the scorn of their elders in Akatsuki. Naruto decided to tackle this one himself, since Deidara wasn't really a stealth person. Naruto calmly knocked on the door, but inside he was a raging tumult of emotions. If this Leaf Genin was really the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki or a suitable substitute, Naruto was off the hook. All he had to do was not use the Nine-Tails chakra, something he didn't even know how to do, in front of an Akatsuki member, and he was home free. Several seconds after his knock, the door opened, and a blue-haired kid poked his head out, Leaf forehead protector on display upon his forehead. To the average passerby, he was a normal kid, if a ninja. But to Naruto, his chakra was a raging sea of raw energy, most of it his own, but trace amounts undeniably demonic in nature. Focusing on the source of the demonic chakra, Naruto found the sea located on the Jinchuriki's stomach contained a chakra exactly like his own. The only difference was the sheer amount, but that would hardly matter. Nine Tails chakra was Nine Tails chakra, regardless of the amount. Naruto was safe. Who the hell are you? Naruto had been so focused on the relief he felt at not being hunted down by his own comrades that he almost missed the target's annoyed response to being woken up from a wonderful nap. Naruto went to step forward and sucker punched the target. With Sage Mode, it would be an easy knockout. Only he couldn't move. Shadow possession complete. Naruto's eye widened as he realized what the target had done. The reason his chakra had been so large and easy to read was because he had been flaring it. The massive chakra source in the small room, coupled with Naruto's single-mindedness in his sensing, meant that the two smaller sources that had been trying to hide their chakra had been passed over without a second thought. With Naruto now on full alert, the two genin were as easy to spot as his own Akatsuki cloak. Naruto had missed them, and was now paying the price. He couldn't move as the large, now larger, genin began spinning towards him. Naruto was in trouble. Or he would be, if he weren't a sage, member of Akatsuki, an S-rank ninja. The shadow that was connected to his own was easily destroyed with some sage chakra channeled through it. He brought his hands up to catch the large human boulder that was hurtling towards him. Thanks to his sage mode, it didn't hurt in the slightest, but the sheer velocity and mass of the technique sent him skidding back into the hallway. The spinning finally stopped, but before the large ball could revert back to a more human shape, Naruto brought his right hand back. He used said hand to deliver a powerful strike to the middle of the large mass in front of him. One could see the hit send ripples across the ball before the genin was sent flying down the hall, cracking the wall upon impact. The fat leaf genin's technique ended as he was forcefully sent spiraling into unconsciousness. With one out of the way, Naruto turned his attention to the two genin in the room, who had since moved out into the hallway. The weaker one's shadow shot out once more, but that was easily dealt with via brute force. The Jinchuriki ran at him with a set of claws, obviously assuming that Naruto would be held immobile by the strange shadow technique. Naruto noticed the chakra coming off of the claws, similar to the day's earlier encounter with a set of trench knives. Not wanting to be cut by a set of genin, Naruto spat a glob of toad oil into the Jinchuriki's face. The oil obscured the blur of movement that was Naruto even more as he delivered a vicious chop to the back of the Jinchuriki's neck, sending him to a forced sleep. Naruto continued on to the third genin, the one that had managed to catch him off guard. Naruto was a sage. Sages were not caught off guard. It might have been petty, but Naruto was in a hurry, and Akatsuki was supposed to be brutal and unforgiving. The straightforward jab appeared to be a simple attack to dodge, and despite Naruto's speed, the young genin appeared to do just that. Then he went flying down the hall anyway. Shikamaru struggled to stay conscious. He hadn't planned on the Akatsuki being this ridiculously powerful. The plan was supposed to end when Choji's human boulder connected with the man at the door. But instead the attack had failed for whatever reason, most likely a defensive jutsu of high rank, and the following fight was better described as a no-holds-barred beatdown. But Sora was a teammate, and dare he say it, a friend. Shikamaru would not allow Akatsuki to win this easily. He struggled to his feet, but his vision was blurred and his ears were ringing with strange notes. He knew he had no real hope of beating an S-rank ninja as he was. And people wondered why he enjoyed himself while he could. Shikamaru was honestly surprised, something that didn't happen often, when his vision cleared up, and was more shocked when he was surrounded by 4 large toads, each wearing what would have been a comical getup in any other situation. Beyond them was a nondescript pink background. The toads seemed immobile, standing with a sword in one hand and the other thrust out as if to hold Shikamaru back. Enjoy your stay. You won't be leaving. Shikamaru looked down to see the Akatsuki member he had been fighting fading away. This was a genjutsu, it had to be. Shikamaru disrupted his chakra flow, slowing down his life energy to a trickle before using all he had in one big flare. When he opened his eyes, he was still surrounded by the 4 toads in his strange prison. Only the toad song to keep him company. Naruto supposed that using the toad confrontation chant might have been overkill for a simple genin, but he was still kind of angry from the whole immobilization thing earlier. Plus, with all luck, the hidden leaf would place a higher priority on 2 genin in comas than a third who went mysteriously missing. Naruto turned around to collect the Jinchuriki, but was furious at what he saw, not that he showed it. I thought I heard Toad song, spoke the man in red, who was holding the Jinchuriki over his shoulder. The newcomer was clad in red and wore a headband with the kanji for oil on it. Naruto grit his teeth at the appearance of the Toad Sannin, knowing that any conflict with him would be long and loud enough to bring any ninja within 100 miles. The Sannin set his charge up against the wall, before running through the seals for the summoning technique. You won't be leaving here. When Jiraiya slapped his hands on the ground, the walls began to morph into a pink flesh. Naruto recognized this as a cave he once found on Mount Myobokuzen, which was in actuality the throat of a massive toad. With the Jinchuriki and the two genin, one unconscious and the other staring blankly into space, Naruto didn't think that he would have to worry about the fire-breathing aspect of this toad that had nearly roasted him all those years ago. Naruto prepared to fight his way out, but Jiraiya noticed a clay spider that was lurking on the ceiling. The spider jumped down, but was impaled on the Sannin's now spiky white mane as it wrapped around him and the Jinchuriki. The explosive went off anyway, and Deidara ran out of the room she had been waiting in. She might like a fight more than Naruto, but she had no wish to use her ultimate art today, and the Sannin would definitely hold them long enough for help to arrive. She knew when a plan had gone south. When Jiraiya's hair returned to its regular size and shape, he was surprised by the amount of smoke in the corridor. The lack of a follow-up attack meant that the Akatsuki duo had fled when he was distracted by the explosion going off in his hair. What the Sannin couldn't figure out was how they had done it. The toad mouth bind was durable enough to take those kinds of explosions all day. As the smoke cleared, Jiraiya first noticed the safety of the three genin on Team 10. Then he noticed the completely clear walls. Somehow, the two had managed to completely destroy the throat of the mountain toad enough to force a summoned dismissal. Jiraiya turned the corner to see a large hole in the wall of the hotel, no doubt caused by that exploding jutsu. Jiraiya approached the wall to check the damage and look for clues as to how they had managed to dismiss his toad. Dynamic entry. Jiraiya knew then, it was just not his day. Being home was a good feeling for most people. Granted, most people didn't leave home after killing hundreds of allies in an attempt to murder a country's leader, getting pursued by legions of hunter ninja, and joining a group of legends and monsters. So Kisame was not experiencing a good feeling because he was home. He was experiencing a good feeling because he was home to finish what he started. Sure, he wasn't supposed to kill the fourth Mizukage in battle like he wanted, but watching the life be slowly siphoned out of him over 3 excruciating days would suffice. Using the Blue Man's intricate knowledge of the islands that composed the Land of Water and the secret tunnels that connected them, Kisame and his partner had snuck through the country to arrive at the village hidden in the mist. The Uchiha wasn't happy about the heavy mist obscuring his precious eyesight, but Kisame was in his element. He had never been as good as Zabuza at silent killing, a fact that irked him each and every day, but the mist was his ally nonetheless. The two S-rank ninjas maneuvered their way around the village for several days, keeping a low profile as they observed the Mizukage's routine. Of course, the two Akatsuki members left the reconnaissance mostly up to Itachi, since Itachi wasn't a missing ninja from the same village they were hiding in. His Sharingan allowed him to discreetly obtain information from loyal mist ninja via genjutsu, and memorize anything instantaneously. And he wasn't a 6-foot-tall blue shark man carrying a massive national treasure on his back secured in some bandages. That might have also had something to do with it. Over a week or two, the dangerous duo had discovered that among the Mizukage's routine, the young ruler trained on a private island not even his ANBU were allowed on. Not only would the Mizukage be alone, but any massive combat commotion that would no doubt ensue when 3 ninja of that caliber clashed would be written off as the Mizukage training. The two snuck onto the island as the Mizukage left from his training session and prepared for his arrival the next day. Upon arriving at his island retreat the next day, Yagura entered a forest that he hadn't destroyed yet during his training. He walked into the foliage for several minutes before he stopped and spoke aloud. I'm fully aware why Kisame would be after me, but I find it difficult to imagine what I did that deserves the wrath of an Uchiha as well. Kisame is aware of this, but I'll warn as Uchiha as well. If you fight me with Kisame, it will be the last fight of your life. The two Akatsuki members emerged from the trees into the clearing where Yagura stood. Itachi was the one to respond in his monotone drawl. We could care less about you. We're after the tailed beast. You are a minor inconvenience. Yagura laughed aloud at that. You really think you can take me? Asked Kisame. He tried once before, and it took all his skills to escape with his life. And I haven't been resting on my laurels either. So come at me, and see if you can make me draw even a drop of the 3 tails chakra, said Yagura as he took the hook staff from its place on his back. Yagura held out his other hand in a half-rammed seal as he held out his staff. A small circle of water formed at the tip, and launched a barrage of needles at the Akatsuki members. Upon closer inspection, one would see that these needles were not made of water as one might expect, but of coral. The Mizukage's coral was unique even by ninja standards, as it drained chakra from whatever it latched onto to grow even larger, eventually encasing its target. Kisame stabbed his blade into the ground and balanced on top of it to get above the coral's reach, but Itachi allowed himself to be struck, only to dissolve into a flock of crows. Kisame meanwhile was busy forming hand seals while balancing on the hilt of Samahata. Upon finishing the seals, the water specialist of Akatsuki reared back his head before puking out hundreds of gallons of water, forming a small tidal wave. As the water rose into the air, Yugura simply twirled his staff around in a circle, the motion forming a larger mirror of water. Upon completing the circle, Yugura hooked the top of his mirror with his staff and drug it to the ground in a single movement. When the mirror struck the ground, water exploded upwards, far more than the mirror had been composed of. Soon Yugura stood atop his own tidal wave, equal in size and shape to Kisame's own. The two exploding water shockwaves collided and cancelled each other out, and Samahata collided with Yugura's staff in a mighty clash of steel and scales. The excess water from the attacks flooded the forest under several dozen feet of water. The two mist ninja landed apart from each other, standing on the water as Itachi reformed out of crows next to Kisame. The blue shark man was frustrated that his attack had been so easily beaten, but Yugura leaned on his staff wearing a smirk. Kisame ran at the Mizukage, who brought up his staff in a defensive stance. Itachi ran after Kisame to assist, but the Mizukage was doing nothing but defending almost contemptuously, wielding his staff effortlessly with one hand. Yugura brought the hook of his weapon down to catch the hilt of Samahata, ripping it from Kisame's grasp. "Coral Palm!" shouted Yugura as he struck forward with his free hand at Kisame's exposed chest. Before he could make contact, however, Itachi struck with his own jutsu. Yugura and Kisame jumped apart as the flaming dragon screamed past them, the water beneath it turning into steam. Yugura's hand caught the edge of the flames despite his hasty retreat, leaving him with a bad burn across his left hand, but nothing an experienced ninja like Yugura couldn't ignore. Kisame landed, and Samahata shot through the water towards him, eager to be reunited with its master. Itachi and Kisame glanced at each other, then nodded in unison. The two moved in perfect harmony, created from years of working together. Itachi dissolved once more into a flock of crows, as Kisame sprinted around Yugura. The crows flocked around Yugura to obscure his vision, but Yugura was able to bat away those that came too close with ease, and sensing Kisame's monstrous chakra was so simple an academy student could do it. Time seemed to slow, however, as one of the crows flew directly past his face, its Sharingan eye staring back intently. The world dissolved to black and white, and the clouds moved backwards in the sky. The crows flying about morphed into shuriken that flew towards the fourth Mizukage at amazing speeds, digging into his flesh and restricting his movement. The Mizukage was no stranger to genjutsu, and recognized this one almost immediately, but somehow, the genjutsu was resisting his attempts to disrupt it. However, through sheer force of will, the Mizukage endured. He convinced himself that the pain was not real, even though every fiber of his body was shouting the exact opposite. He convinced himself the pain was fake, until a large object hit him square in the back. He could feel the chakra being drained, eaten as Samahata was dragged along his back. The most powerful of the 7 swords shave off a fair bit of flesh as well. Yugura could only compare the sensation to having a stick covered in razor blades run across his back, only several hundred times worse. Looking up to the black sky, Yugura saw that not even that pain had been able to break him out of the genjutsu. As he gazed upon the Sharingan moon, he realized it was getting closer. He tried to move, but the pain, both real and genjutsu-induced, made sure he could only look on in terror as the orb descended and crushed him. In the distance, he heard Itachi's monotonous voice echo, 71 hours 59 minutes and 59 seconds remaining. Itachi held his hand up to cover his bleeding left eye as Yugura collapsed on the ground. Kisame turned his eyes to his partner, worried that whatever technique Itachi used had some detrimental side effect. Their attention quickly turned to the Mizukage, who despite the powerful genjutsu and extreme pain was standing back up, this time coated in a cloak of solid red chakra. 3 tails swished behind him as he moved his hands together into a series of hand seals. Kisame brought up Samahata to deflect whatever came at them, and Itachi's Sharingan blazed back to life, showing him every move in slow motion before it was made. But neither of them was prepared for what came next. The Mizukage slammed his hands together and released a massive blast of demonic chakra. The deep water that Kisame had placed to assist his techniques was pushed back in a large tidal wave that the Akatsuki partners jumped away from. When the water settled, the Mizukage was gone, leaving the 2 missing ninja alone on a placid lake. It seemed as though he had made his escape, but Samahata and Itachi's Sharingan picked up the buildup of chakra below in time for them to start running away. The lake beneath their previous location suddenly erupted in a spray of water and deadly black chakra. As the blast dissipated, a large 3-tailed turtle emerged from the depths of the water. One eye closed, the spiky beast spat out a massive ball of water that quickly approached the 2 Akatsuki members. Kisame brought Samahata up to block the attack, and the shark sword ate the chakra in the water bullet. Kisame was taken aback when the enormous amount of chakra caused Samahata grow exponentially, its sudden increase in mass almost causing Kisame to drop his sword. The most powerful of the 7 swordsmen had been sure that Samahata could take more than 1 water bullet, but he didn't know that it wasn't a water bullet. In actuality, it had been a ball of pure water chakra, dense enough to have the appearance of real water. Kisame steadied his now even more massive sword as the half-submerged three tails quickly swam towards them. Kisame quickly ran through the hand signs of the one jutsu he knew that might be able to defeat the beast as the hilt of his sword snaked its way up his sleeve. The transformed Yagura was met with a large ball of water in front of him, but confident in the swimming abilities of his transformed state, swam right on in. He could immediately feel his chakra being drained, but against the raw power of a tailed beast, the amount being taken was a pittance. The Mizukage saw a small creature darting around his head, and felt it striking at his hard shell, drawing a little chakra each time. As it darted before him once more, he noticed the figure was actually Kisame, who had somehow developed a method of fusing with his sword to become even more shark-like. The monster that Kisame had become was puny compared to the monster Yagura had become, but he was fast monster underwater. Kisame ran through some quick hand seals and summoned a multitude of sharks made of the surrounding water to hide himself in as he, and his sharks, began eating away at the three tails chakra reserves. The beast bellowed and swung its tails, destroying many sharks, but the predators seemed to be numberless, splitting into more when they ate enough chakra. The three tails roared, the sound containing a huge amount of chakra itself. Enough chakra, in fact, to disrupt Kisame's feeding frenzy technique, as the sharks dispersed into the surrounding waters. The demonic turtle had definitely lost mass, and Kisame was glad to know his jutsu had done something, even if he had been stealing chakra, not flesh. Then Kisame noticed that the beast was actually regaining its previous size before his eyes. The half-shark looked closer and saw that the edges of the beast were made of the same red chakra he had seen the Mizukage covered in after Itachi's genjutsu. Kisame grinned as he realized the implications of fighting an opponent whose entire body was composed of chakra. The water expert of Akatsuki dispersed his water prison shark dance technique, the water running off into the ocean. His sword emerged from his arm as his appearance became more normal. The three tails didn't expect the sudden change of battlefield, and so fell to the ground from the now air-inhabited sky. Kisame looked up and began flying through the seals needed for his trump card before the giant turtle crushed him. He finished, and thrust his hand skyward. "Super Water Shark Bomb!" shouted Kisame as the water beneath him churned upward, forming a massive shark that charged the falling three tails. The shark engulfed its target, then clamped its mouth shut, mimicking a movement made by Kisame's hands. The three tails began to rapidly shrink, and the shark bomb rocketed up into the sky as it grew to epic proportions, dwarfing the sun in the sky. The now chakraless Yagura was launched along in the torrent of water. The technique lived up to its name as it exploded high in the sky. Kisame panted with his arms raised to the sky as he looked over at his partner, who was looking as odd as his Uchiha pride would let him. The Uchiha had made himself scarce when Kisame had flooded the battlefield, and Kisame was glad for it. They both knew that the fire user would only be a hindrance in the water prison shark dance. The debris from Kisame's shark bomb fell from the sky like rain, but one chunk was larger than the rest. Kisame and Itachi looked at the very wet, very dead body of the fourth Mizukage before turning their gaze to each other. The final attack had been too powerful, fueled by the full power of a tailed beast, and had killed Yagura. The two were not excited to think of Pain's reaction to their failed mission. "On the upside, no one will know it was Akatsuki if we get out of here fast enough?" suggested Kisame. Itachi simply nodded, and the two quickly disappeared. Jiraiya was not in a good mood. He had found Tsunade, and she had returned, if just to heal their sensei. The legendary medic had also healed the three genin that had been injured by Akatsuki as well as their sensei, who had nearly had his legs blown off. After the third Hokage's plea, the last Senju had agreed to stay in the village and take over for the old monkey if he kicked the bucket. This was all great news, but it did nothing to alleviate the foul mood that had fallen over the Toad Sage since his brief run-in with Akatsuki. He had thought back to the forced unsummoning of the fire-breathing mountain toad's throat, and the bombs he blocked wouldn't have done the kind of damage necessary to dismiss the summon. Besides, the lack of shockwaves or booms pointed to it not being forced dismissal by damage at all. And the only alternative was dismissal by another summoner. And that was impossible, since Jiraiya knew he was the only summoner, except for the other toads. The Akatsuki member had also seemed to use the toad confrontation chant on Shikamaru, something only Fukasaku and Shima working together could do. Which meant that blonde-haired Akatsuki member had done the impossible twice. And Jiraiya hadn't been looking, but he could have sworn that the missing ninja had been utilizing Sage Mode from Shikamaru's reports. Most took the being hit by nothing after dodging story as the word of a concussed genin who had been in a genjutsu coma for 2 weeks. But Jiraiya knew such technique was possible. And he knew of only 2 people besides himself who could do it. "Ah, Jiraiya my boy. How nice of you to visit. What brings you out to our humble mountain?" asked Fukasaku as Jiraiya approached the dwelling of the 2 elderly toads. "Ma's a little mad you don't come by more often, so you might want to compliment her cooking first if you want her to talk to you." whispered Fukasaku to the old toad summoner. Actually, Pa, I'm here to see if you know anything about a group called Akatsuki, said Jiraiya, cutting right to the chase. I fought one of their members, and he did things only a toad summoner could do. I was wondering when you two would meet, said Shima as she emerged from the hut carrying a platter of various bugs and insects. Naruto has been a toad summoner in the world for several years now. What? What happened to me picking my own apprentice and successor? And besides, he's allied with the enemy, exclaimed Jiraiya. Akatsuki isn't just a group of missing ninja, they directly attacked the hidden leaf. You had your shot to pick a successor, but Minato died. And as tragic as that was, there wasn't another successor coming from you, so we picked him to be our summoner, said Fukasaku calmly. And before you get your mouth all puffed up, the toads serve their summoner. We've been allied with others before the hidden leaf and will be allied with others after the hidden leaf. As long as we have a summoner roaming the world, the toads are content. So what? I'm not a toad summoner anymore? Asked Jiraiya in disbelief. No. The toads will still heed your calls and follow your instructions, but we'll also do the same for anyone else who holds our summoning contract. Now calm down before you start crying and have some lunch, said Shima reassuringly as she held up the platter of food for Jiraiya to sample. No. Thanks. I just ate before I came up here, panicked the Sannin before becoming serious once more. I understand your reasons, but I still don't like this. Having a toad summoner playing for the other team is something I can't support, and I can't believe you do. Jiraiya, we're older than you by a long shot. This isn't our first picnic, and the transition between summoner loyalties is always conflicting. This method has worked for the toads in the past, and it will work again. Maybe not for you, but consider it a trial by fire. If you can beat Naruto, you can pick another summoner to succeed you as the strongest toad summoner, said Fukasaku solemnly, showing every one of his hundreds of years through his words. Alright. I'm not one to argue with tried and true methods like that, but I will be beating this upstart brat and defending my summoning contract, said Jiraiya, acknowledging his resignation to the way things had to be. So his name is Naruto, huh? Seems familiar. He was named after your first book, you fool, said Fukasaku, almost proudly. Huh, grunted Jiraiya. I guess he sort of is my legacy, but if so, he's a legacy I have to erase. Akatsuki isn't some after-school club. They're my enemies, and anyone affiliated with them has to go down. Fukasaku and Shima could only worry about for the lives of their students as Jiraiya walked away from the two elder sages. Pain was not in a good mood. He rarely was, but today was worse than most. He had amassed a group of the strongest missing ninja and unaffiliated ninja in the world, but somehow, they had managed to fail, not once, but 2 times in the same week. Naruto and Deidara were excusable. They were young and trying to prove themselves, and fleeing when confronted by Jiraiya of the Sannin not 20 miles from the hidden leaf was understandable. But Kisame losing himself in the battle in the past resulted in the death of the 4th Mizukage, and the 3 tails along with him. Luckily the mishap had occurred with one of the lesser-tailed beasts. The more tails the beast had, the longer it would take for the tailed beast to reform. Each tail corresponded to roughly a year, give or take. A 3-year delay was annoying and inconvenient, but at least Kisame hadn't killed the 8 tails. Why Itachi hadn't been able to stop the Shark Man was a mystery, but the rogue Uchiha had Pain's confidence, unless Pain violated his end of the deal. Pain held no illusions that anyone in Akatsuki besides himself and Konan cared about world peace, and in fact would be surprised if he didn't have to kill some of them before this was all over. He already had. One of the repercussions of Itachi joining Akatsuki had been Pain learning of Madara and his true goals. He had dared defy a god, and paid the price. Pain did have to admit though, the fool had earned his place as an S-rank ninja. It was a confidence booster as well. If Pain could defeat the great Madara Uchiha, he could defeat anyone. But for the most part, Akatsuki helped them get what they wanted, and that was how the missing ninja world worked. You did what suited you with who suited you and dumped them the moment something else suited you more. The process usually involved one of the parties dead on the ground, but not only the best survived. And Akatsuki were the best. Yet the best had messed up twice, once to expose them and their short-term goals to the hidden leaf, and once to delay their plan a full 3 years. There was a meeting of Akatsuki about to start, and Pain would let the 4 failures know the depths of his displeasure. Naruto hadn't been happy to receive Pain's anger, even though it was more like being informed of his failure. He was just reminded that he had failed in front of 9 of the most powerful people in the world, all of whom had been doing this for much longer than he had, Deidara excluded. Akatsuki's youngest had blown their mission, and exposed Akatsuki as a criminal group hunting Jinchuriki in the process. Naruto had been relieved that Kisame and Itachi had apparently also screwed up big time, managing to kill one of the 9 people in the world that Akatsuki was supposed to take alive. The whole debacle would push Akatsuki's plans back a full 3 years, during which they would lay low and hope that Akatsuki would be forgotten. In the meantime, Akatsuki still had to take jobs, both to keep a steady income and to keep in view of the other nations that employed the group. Dropping off the face of the map would raise more questions than they would like. Months had passed, but the 2 teams responsible were still paying for their failure. To pay for their failure, the 2 blondes had been given second to last pick of the missions. Kakuzu had jumped on the bounty hunting request before his partner could blink, or swear, and Sasori decided to take an assassination job that would hopefully net him a strong puppet. As leader of Akatsuki, Pain could not be bothered with missions, so Deidara had decided to take the more interesting of the 2 remaining jobs. At the end of the day, conquering a small nation sounded much more fun than stealing a piece of art. Plus, Deidara would likely disagree with the so-called art and turn it into true art, voiding the contract to recover the masterpiece intact. So the 2 youngest members of Akatsuki left to blow up a nation, leaving their 2 elders to sneak into a museum. The land of honey wouldn't know what hit it. Team Asuma reporting for duty, Lord Hokage, said Shikamaru as he stood at attention alongside Choji and Sora. Please, it's a title I'll be passing on in a few weeks' time. Once the paperwork goes through, I'll just be Sarutobi, said the wizened old man behind the desk. He was 69 years old, an impressive feat for any ninja, and retiring for the second time. This time, the title of Hokage would be passing on to his student, Tsunade of the Sannin. The legendary medic had brought her teacher out of the coma he had been launched into after defending his village from the invasion of the Hidden Sand. The invasion had failed spectacularly, but the oldest Kage had been seriously hurt in the process of defeating the 4th Kazekage. The man had, among other injuries, managed to crush a lung with his feared gold dust techniques. The 3rd Hokage was alive, but he would fight no more. Tsunade had agreed to take the position, but the paperwork would take time to be approved by the feudal lord, and then by the jonin of the village. Still, Lord Hokage, it is a title you will bear for the time being. What was this mission that you called us here to give in person? Asked Shikamaru. This is to be your first test as a Chunin, Shikamaru. Your team was chosen for their unique skills that make them perfect for this mission. It comes straight from the feudal lord of the Land of Fire. Bear in mind that this mission involves a nation's governance, warned the 3rd Hokage. Shikamaru sighed as his slouch seemed to become even more pronounced. What a pain. The genin present decided to make their thought heard as well. Don't say that in front of Asuma's old man. Sora berated his teammate. Will we have time to eat on this mission? Chimed in Choji. Talking about food again? Asked Ino Yamanaka as she walked into the room along with the rest of her team. Why do you care? Asked Choji as he took an angry step forward. Besides, why are you guys even here? Asked Sora as he glared at the 1 male genin on Team 7. The Hokage called us in for a mission. It'll be our first rank above D in a while, not that you losers would be trusted with a mission even that important. Shot back the Uchiha. Yeah, Sasuke is the best around. It's amazing he isn't being given an even more important mission, like an A rank, shrieked the pink-haired member of the team. Whatever, retorted Sora. Our mission was a special request from the feudal lord himself. Beat that, you jerks. Actually, I think you'll find none of you will win this little argument, interrupted the Hokage, reminding everyone of the present company. The 2 teams stood in a single line like the soldiers they were, and not the children they had been behaving like. Since you'll all be going on the same B-rank mission, no one can claim to be better than the others. Of course, as the only Chunin here, Shikamaru will be leading this mission. The Hokage took a second to chuckle to himself at the incredulous expressions on the genins' faces. The single Chunin in the room looked like he might be sick. Now would you like me to explain what this mission is? Of course. Our apologies, Lord Hokage, answered Shikamaru promptly. Please continue. Put bluntly, this mission will be a kidnapping. A young lord is being held in the capital of the Land of Honey. The mission will be to recover him from the Land of Honey, and bring him back to the Land of Fire. Due to political reasons that I won't bore you with, anonymity is required. You must not be discovered. The details are in the mission scroll I gave you, said the Hokage, all business from this point out. The assembled teenagers gulped as they witnessed the change from kind grandfather to ruthless dictator in under a second. Do you understand? Of course, Lord Hokage, said Shikamaru. He turned to address the other 5 members of his team. Let's go. The 6 classmates all exited the room and quickly left the building for their destination. The Hokage watched them leaving through the large window of his office. Without turning around, he addressed the brown-haired ANBU member behind him. This mission is meant as a test for Shikamaru, to see if he can handle himself in the field, but this mission could quickly spiral into an A or even S rank. I'll trust your judgment on how far they can handle themselves. Just try to keep them safe discreetly. Of course, sir, said the ANBU as he faded into the wooden floorboards of the office floor. Okay, so all I saw was destroy a nation of steal something, and I didn't look too closely beyond that. So, what exactly are we doing, yeah? Asked Deidara as she and her partner flew through the sky on a clay owl. It wasn't exactly the fastest thing she had ever made, but they were in no hurry. The job is to destroy the land of Honey's royal family. Take them out and cripple the military, and the whole nation will be easily conquered by our clients. In this case, a larger nation that wants their territory. Responded Naruto, not really surprised that Deidara hadn't actually read the details of the mission. It was part of her strange charm. Land of Honey, huh? Said Deidara, more to herself than to Naruto. That's like 3 days away from the hideout too if we fly like this, yeah? Naruto cracked open one eye, but otherwise didn't move from his meditative stance. Yes, it is, though I don't see where you're going with this. Isn't the land of Honey that way from the hideout? Asked Deidara, pointing back the way they had been flying for over a day. This time Naruto moved an arm to place his face in his palm as he sighed. Dang it. If anyone looked up, they would see a large white bird turning around. So what are we going with? Choji bashes down the gates with his human boulder? No, we're trying not to be spotted, I got it. Ino's mind transfer? Maybe coupled with your shadow possession, am I right? I'm right, said Sora as he looked sideways at the leader of the squad. He nodded at the end of his speculative rant, as if to confirm his suspicions. He tilted his head sideways in confusion as he continued. Though I don't see why the king of the jerks and I are here. Do you plan to just blow down the doors and kill everyone but the target? No, Sasuke is here because he's on a team with Ino, whose mind transfer will come into play. You two will also be handy to have around if things go south. But the real key players are you and Choji, answered Shikamaru as he got up from his thinking pose. What? You're entrusting the key role to those two buffoons? Exclaimed Sakura. She gestured to the blue-haired boy in particular, who was in the process of making faces at his stoic rival. We might as well just head back now and say the mission was a failure. Hold on. I never said it was a complicated role, just a key one, said Shikamaru. The goal is to use an annual eating competition as a distraction while we remove the young lord. An eating competition will be much more interesting to watch with these two participating, don't you think? I'll go along with this plan. You know what you're doing, spoke up Sasuke, and his two female teammates were quick to agree, then disagree about who was the first to agree. We know you're a genius, so just point us in the right direction, said Sora, pointing over his shoulder to Choji, who nodded in agreement. Good. I'll explain each of your roles in greater detail when we get to that point. Right now, Choji and Sora have to register for the competition. I'd hurry, since registration closes in an hour, said Shikamaru, catching the look on his teammates' face when they heard about being only an hour away from losing as much food as they could eat. As an Akimichi, Choji converted his calories and stored fat directly into chakra for his techniques. This had turned into a love of eating, as using even a single technique left the rotund genin feeling incredibly hungry. Sora, on the other hand, had no such excuse, he just ate massive quantities of any food he found delicious. His claim that everyone else was just bad at eating didn't convince anyone, but it appeared that the two's love of food would come in handy on this mission. Just know that for the plan to work, one of you has to come in second place. Any plan that involves food is fine by me. Let's go, Sora! Shouted Choji. The two shouted a loud huzzah in unison before running into the city proper. Shikamaru sighed at his team, before he turned to the other 3 genin he had been placed in charge of. Team 7 looked at him skeptically, but held back any chatter. Alright, Ino, you're with me. Sasuke and Sakura, you find a hotel for us to stay at. The competition lasts for 2 days, and we may need to take a third to get everyone back together. Make it out of the way enough to hide a body, but close enough to the courtyard that we won't have far to go. Got it? Humph. As if I would screw up something as simple as that. Should we meet you after the room is booked? Inquired Sasuke. No. I'll need your Sharingan for the plan tomorrow, but take it easy today and lay low, answered Shikamaru. Understood, said the members of Team 7. The rookies scattered to enact Shikamaru's plan. Seriously, I love all my art, but this owl is so slow, yeah, exclaimed Deidara to her partner as they slowly drifted through the skies. Just let me make a hawk, and we'll be there by tomorrow morning. I'm a sage, Deidara. Sages are supposed to be wise. Owls are wise. Ergo, a sage should arrive on an owl, answered Naruto calmly, confident in his logic. For someone so wise, you really aren't all that smart. We'll be arriving in the capital to destroy everything. I don't think anyone will care if you arrive on an owl. And this owl will take us another 2 days. Let me make a faster bird already," argued Deidara. "No. Someone might care what we arrive on. We're S-rank ninjas, Deidara. We can't be seen as hyperactive kids who rush around everywhere. Besides, it's not like the land of honey is going anywhere. It'll be there in 2 days as surely as it will be there tomorrow," retorted Naruto. Deidara sighed into her hand before an idea came. What about a compromise? A dragon would be faster than this owl, but not as fast as a hawk, and something so big would show more power. Plus, I hear dragons live forever, so it'll be plenty wise as well. What do you say? That is a brilliant idea, exclaimed Naruto as he jumped to his feet. Let's do this. Deidara pulled out a large chunk of clay in each hand. In order to make a large enough dragon, she'd have to use both chunks. After infusing it with her special blend of explosive chakra, Deidara slapped her hands together. She always hated this part. She could never get over the feeling of being French kissed as the two hand mouths worked together to shape the clay. Still, true art required sacrifice. The dragon finally emerged, and Deidara threw it off the side of the owl the two were currently riding on. A large cloud of smoke accompanied Deidara's hand seal, and a large white dragon rose from underneath the two Akatsuki members. They jumped off of the owl and landed on the dragon, which then began flying at a much faster pace than the owl had been. You were right, Deidara. This dragon will leave a much better impression, said Naruto as he resumed his meditation. Glad I could help, mumbled the blonde artist, rolling an eye for emphasis even though Naruto couldn't see it. Choji and Sora looked at the massive piles of bean jam cakes piled before them, then looked at each other, then back at the food. The official in charge blew a whistle, and the food began flying into their mouths. Choji and Sora were digging in with the best of them, and all they had to do was finish the plate within the time limit. For the next several minutes, the two genin were in heaven. Well, they're doing their job rather well. Deadpan Ino. Shikamaru and Ino were hiding on the roof of the gatehouse that overlooked the courtyard where the competition was taking place. The first section of the challenge was solely for observation and identifying the targets. What is my part in all this going to be, now that we have time to chat? See that little kid over there? Asked Shikamaru, gesturing to a young child in the spectator's box alongside a small girl and an older man who was clearly the lord of the land of honey. Looking closer, she could also see a grizzled samurai standing guard in the shadows. He's the young lord we're trying to recover. Near the end of the finals, you'll use your mind transfer to get him alone. The bodyguard will follow to make sure he's trying to make a break for it, but Sasuke's Sharingan should be able to catch him in a genjutsu long enough to get him out of the way. What, you mean kill him? Asked Ino, incredulous that her childhood friend could be so heartless. No. The point of not being seen is to leave no evidence. A corpse would point to ninja, and the hidden leaf is the only possible suspect within the area that would be hired, pointed out Shikamaru. No, a genjutsu is the answer here as well. I just hope Sasuke can handle such delicate work. Of course Sasuke can handle this. He could handle anything. Though delicacy isn't exactly his strong suit, admitted Ino. But Sasuke can definitely do it. Let's hope he can, or this entire plan will fall apart, muttered Shikamaru. Sora and Choji were oblivious to all of this, and were pressuring the referee to give them some more ramen before that phase of the competition. When he explained that they'd have to wait until tomorrow, the two undercover genin looked absolutely crushed, but quickly perked up at the thought of more food tomorrow. The group met at the hotel Sasuke and Sakura had picked out, which fit Shikamaru's specifications perfectly. The plan was relayed to everyone, even the two that would just be eating. The only requirement of them was that one of them win second place, in order to get the runner-up prize. Sakura voiced concerns for the sanity of a man that would give a house for first place, and a large basket for second place, and a small basket for third. Shikamaru responded that the sanity, or lack thereof, of such prizes was inconsequential, all that mattered was that those were the prizes. The young lord would be snuck out inside the large wicker basket, which Choji or Sora would take upon winning second place. The two would exit with the young lord, still inside his basket, after the competition, just some country folk who had come in for the free food. The genius of this plan was its simplicity. Shikamaru only hoped that the simplicity made it easy to pull off, and didn't make it transparent as a glass wall. So after we catch a Jinchuriki, what do we even do? Asked Deidara, sitting in a thinking position as their dragon lazily soared through the skies. I mean, I know we need them alive, yeah? But why? We seal their tailed beasts. It kills the Jinchuriki, but we need them alive until then, otherwise it won't work, answered Naruto, opening his toad-like eyes and cracking his neck. A tailed beast won't stay sealed inside a dead host. If the seal is weak enough, you'll be fighting a full-powered tailed beast. If it's too strong, the tailed beast dies and has to reform. The stronger the beast, the longer that process takes. I know that, yeah? I listened to leaders' briefings. Shot back Deidara, annoyed at her partner's low opinion of her intelligence. I meant, how do we seal them? Do we have, like, a big jar or something? Naruto was actually stumped by this question, as Pain had not yet told any of them how they were to actually seal the tailed beasts once they were acquired. And Naruto was sagely enough to admit when he didn't know. I actually have no idea. Maybe we seal them in a jar or something, he speculated. Maybe we just chain it to the ground. That's kind of fun sounding actually, yeah? It'd be like a zoo. We just walk up and give the 9 tails some steak, or eat some calamari right in front of the 8 tails. We could stand on their heads and pretend to be controlling them, said Deidara, imaging riding on the head of the 9 tails like the legendary Madara Uchiha. I wonder if their fur is soft, yeah? Who knows? We'll find out when we start sealing them, shrugged Naruto, before sitting upright and turned to face his partner, a wide smile on his face. Let's agree to find out as soon as we can. We can't hunt Jinchuriki for 3 more years thanks to Kisame killing his target, but as soon as those 3 years are up, we take out your target as fast as we can. Deal? Sound like a plan, yeah? Deal, agreed Deidara. Her target, the 1 tail, would be the first down. Tatewaki had been left the samurai of the Land of Iron, not for any lack of skill, but because he simply could not bear to continue living in the land where his master had died any longer. He had become a wandering mercenary, and found his way into the feudal lord of the Land of Honey's employ. His duties only technically consisted of watching over the safety of the lord and his daughter Chiyo, but he had recently taken up a new duty as well. He played the role of both bodyguard and watcher of Shu, a young lord who had been kidnapped from his own land and was being held here for political reasons that Tatewaki didn't care to know about. He felt bad for Shu, both because he was a child and because kidnapping went against everything he had learned as a samurai. But orders were orders, and following orders was something else he had learned as a samurai. The eating contest, despite its conceptual idiocy and security risks, proved to be something Tatewaki was enjoying. Mainly because Shu was enjoying it, especially the apparent rivalry between 2 of the contestants, who were no older than Shu was. The blue-haired one had less of the frenzy that his rival had about him, but still managed to keep pace with the chunkier brown-haired boy that was his main competition. The 2 had easily blown through the preliminaries, and were dominating the finals. Despite the seemingly mundane task of eating being the main spectacle here, the seriousness with which it was treated by the 2 boys and their fellow competitors made it rather interesting to watch. Which made Tatewaki suspicious when Shu suddenly stiffened before declaring he had to use the restroom. This in itself wasn't odd, but the finals were drawing to a close, and it was a tight race. Shu had seemed incredibly excited to see who emerged victorious, but suddenly dropped all emotion for a second and made an excuse to leave. It didn't add up in Tatwaki's book, and when something didn't add up, a samurai knew that ninja were somehow involved. Perhaps it was some strange mind technique that could be employed remotely, but no ninja, mind trick or not, would get past him to Shu. Tatewaki silently slipped out of the royal booth, as was his duty as silent protector, and followed the young lord to what appeared to be not a restroom, but a theater room. He entered the room right behind Shu, the door blocking his view for a split second, but that was enough for the young boy to disappear. Tatewaki knew something was amiss and drew his katana, getting into a ready stance and looking around for Shu, or anyone else for that matter. Look behind you, fool. Tatewaki was surprised by the mocking voice that rang out behind him. He did as the voice said and turned around, but had his sword already coming down in an overhead slice that would cleave the speaker in half. He never got the chance, however, as the act of turning brought him face to face with a disembodied pair of blood-red eyes. 3 black dots swirled in each eye, and Tatewaki felt himself losing control of his own body. Then he felt nothing. Tatewaki opened his eyes to find himself back in the booth watching the eating competition's end. The blue-haired boy had come out just ahead of the chubbier boy. The only person missing was Shu. Tatewaki began to shout out an order to find the boy, but stopped just as suddenly. Shu went back to his chambers, supplied his mind. He was feeling ill, so I escorted him there, and then set up a guard. The voice in his head didn't sound quite right, but Tatewaki decided to trust himself for the time being, but he firmly decided to check up on Shu the moment he received a plausible excuse to remove himself from the presence of a feudal lord. Which looked like it would be soon, as the competitors were leaving, all but the blue-haired boy, who seemed fidgety and nervous, but he was a teenager from the country meeting royalty, so nerves were understandable. He would spend the night in the palace with the accountants and such, settling legal matters with the prize house formed the contest. In all likelihood, he would sell the house and take the money back home to the country the next day, but he would still be rich and have a great story. Tatewaki escorted Chiyo and her father to their rooms, after clearing the insides of any intruders, and left to check up on Shu, he could only hope that Shu was still in there. While his mind continued to affirm the truth of the matter, he could not help but doubt himself. His fears were well founded. Shikamaru walked away from the village with his squad, sans Sora, Choji carrying a large and heavy wicker basket. The basket in fact contained the young lord the group had been tasked with recovering. Sora would stay behind to draw any suspicion away from him, and Choji leaving immediately after the contest when they had won first and second. He would sell the house and catch up with them the next day, hopefully with a large bonus to go around. The group set up camp a ways outside the capital city, so Sora wouldn't have as far to catch up. The sun was setting, and the group had taken the seamless execution of the plan as grounds to relax. Shikamaru couldn't blame them, the hardest parts were over and they should be relieved. But they couldn't afford to relax entirely. No good ninja ever should. They were cooking dinner over the fire when proof that they had let their guard down too far occurred. Sasuke was sitting on a log near the fire, his two teammates arguing over who got to sit next to him. Choji was lying up against a tree, completely full for once in his life, and Shikamaru was marveling that his plan had worked and worrying for Sora's well-being. Then the ambient light from the setting sun was blocked out by a large creature flying overhead. When the genin and one chunin looked up, they saw what appeared to be a large pale dragon flying overhead. They ran to the edge of the forest, a hill that overlooked the city, and saw hundreds of small specks fall off the distant dragon. They dispersed across the city, going on their own power most of the way. Then the capital city of the land of honey exploded. In the span of 1 second, it had gone from a thriving and sleepy city to a flaming nightmare. Sasuke and Shikamaru shared a look, and an unspoken understanding passed between them. Shikamaru grabbed Choji and Ino, pulling them back into the woods. Sakura looked uncertainly at Sasuke and spoke up as the dragon began spitting out smaller beasts that created larger explosions that only seemed to increase the screams coming from the city, if that were possible. Sasuke? What should we do? You go with Shikamaru, I have to get Sora out of there. Whoever that is isn't concerned with anyone in particular it seems, so I'll go in, grab the moron, and get out, said Sasuke as he ran down the hill to the city full speed, Sharingan blazing. Sasuke navigated the city at the same speed. A lesser ninja would have had to slow down to avoid explosions and debris and the like, but lesser ninja didn't have the Sharingan. He found his way to the castle with little trouble, but was stopped from jumping over the wall by what appeared to be a large frog wearing armor. The beast had grabbed his leg with its tongue and pulled him violently back down to earth. Sasuke's incredulousness rose even further as the frog then spoke to him. Sorry, didn't realize that wouldn't kill you. I'm a klutz like my dad, but I'll try to make it quick. Sasuke quickly got over his shock by thinking of the amphibian as just an enemy to be defeated. He quickly slid underneath the thing's chin and delivered a powerful upwards kick. As a creature that specialized in jumping large distances straight up, the toad was hardly fazed. It was more fazed when Sasuke appeared above it and slammed it back down into the ground with another powerful kick. Sasuke used the momentum from his kick to propel himself over the wall and landed gracefully. He opened his eyes only to cringe in horror at the carnage that was all around him. Bodies had exploded in macabre splatters of blood, while others were cleanly bisected or had holes punched right through them. More were burned in a large pile, and the flames had spread to the castle proper, illuminating the night with a golden light that seemed far more innocent than it deserved to. Sasuke ran into the castle, hoping against hope that he wasn't too late. The first thing he noticed when he entered the antechamber was that the large metal door that guarded the feudal lord's throne room were knocked down. One had a blast mark on it, and the other was deeply dented. The second thing he noticed were the moving bodies beyond the collapsed doors. He ran forward, hoping that one of the two figures was Sora, but he stopped short as he noticed what the two were wearing. The black cloaks adorned with red clouds were exactly as Sora and Shikamaru had described them, only covered in blood and gore. Their blonde hair, one done up in a ponytail and the other in loosely kept spikes, further identified them as the members of Akatsuki that had defeated not only Team 10, but Asuma and Kurenai as well, apparently without breaking a sweat. Looking past them, as if he could, Sasuke was ecstatic to see Sora alive and well, standing alongside the samurai he had fooled earlier in the day with his Sharingan's genjutsu. The two stood side by side, almost obscuring the small girl behind them, fearfully clutching a naginata. The two Akatsuki members hadn't appeared to have noticed him yet, so he ran forward, the boards cracking underfoot as he ran through hand seals. Feet away, his hand was engulfed in blue lightning and the air was filled with the screeching of 1,000 birds. As he ran, his left hand intent on impaling the heart of the longer-haired blonde, he shouted the name of his jutsu, the A-rank assassination jutsu passed down by Kakashi of the Sharingan, one of 3 people on the face of the planet left with the legendary bloodline. Chidori! His Sharingan proved a curse then, as he could see every second in slow motion and had it engraved into his memory forever. His hand was stopped short of the Akatsuki member's back by the right hand of the other one. The man's grip was crushing, and thought his sheer proximity to the Chidori caused minor burns on his skin, those healed before Sasuke's very eyes as they appeared. Sasuke knew he was completely outclassed when the blonde who couldn't possibly be more than 5 years his senior spoke for the first time. Impudent fool. The insult was accompanied by a large force that pulled him off his feet and slammed him into the ground in front of the two dangerous ninja. Sasuke. Sasuke was vaguely aware of Sora voicing his concern, but his spinning head had only heard the words spoken by the Akatsuki member that was looking down at him. I guess the Sharingan doesn't make a ninja great. It must only be Itachi's innate skill that makes him so powerful. If I were him, I'd be ashamed to call you my brother. The mere mention of Itachi would have normally sent Sasuke flying into a murderous rage at the person who would dare compare him to his treacherous brother. But this man had just sent Sasuke sprawling, and he could barely move, let alone fight. Still, he wishes to kill you himself, so I'll let you live to fight another day. But don't show up with these paltry skills, or he won't even have to open his eyes. The Akatsuki member's foot came down at Sasuke's stunned face, and he fell into unconsciousness. Naruto turned to the Jinchuriki and the samurai that were guarding the last member of the royal family. We aren't able to capture you at the moment, Nine Tails, so step aside and we'll let you take your Uchiha friend and leave. And let you murder this girl? No way! Shouted Sora at the two Akatsuki members that were assigned to capture him. I'll die before I let you kill a defenseless little girl. Ha! How many do you think my art got, yeah? Asked Deidara, doubled over with fake laughter as she faced her partner. She straightened up and turned back to Sora. We're S-rank missing ninja who get employed for war. If you want us to stop killing, you'll have to kill us, and that's not happening. Sora's clever and stubborn retort was cut off by Naruto's controlled combat voice. Let's go, Deidara. What? There's only 2 left, and we can capture your target while we're at it. Why would we want to leave? Exclaimed Deidara, incredulous that he would give up so easily. We aren't allowed to capture him at this point, unless you'd rather go against Leader. And if we fight, he'll fight to the death. Leader wouldn't bother telling us off then, he'd just kill us outright, said Naruto to his partner before turning to the 3 other conscious people in the room. If the princess over there disappears, she can live. If she presses her claim to rule, we come back and finish the job. Let's go. The 2 Akatsuki members turned and began to walk away. Tatewaki, however, was a samurai, and his samurai training had instilled in him a deep sense of honor. He would not allow this threat to leave unchallenged and alive. It was his duty to fight and kill these monsters before they could kill more innocent people. Bolstered by these thoughts, Tatewaki channeled chakra down the length of his sword to increase its cutting potential and swung downwards at the neck of the one who was obviously the leader. His sword connected, and the excess chakra slashed through even the ground below, kicking up a cloud of dust and debris. Shame about your choice, rang out an irritated voice. Tatwaki's eyes widened in shock as the dust settled, and he saw that his sword hadn't decapitated the Akatsuki member. Instead, his katana was stopped at the junction of shoulder and neck, having not even penetrated the skin. The blonde turned his head, and Tatewaki got his first clear look at his opponent's golden, toad-like eyes. Shame, but not even an inconvenience. The end of his sentence was punctuated by his right elbow shooting back. It made solid contact, but hurt far more than a blow of that speed should have. Tatewaki felt as though the wind had been knocked out of him by a sledgehammer, not an elbow. As he doubled over in pain, the elbow that had been jammed into his abdomen came up and delivered an equally devastating blow to his head. Tatewaki went flying head over heels and landed face down on the wooden floor. As he struggled to get back up, he saw one foot poking out of a black and red cloak. Any thought of where the other foot was ended as the foot in question came down on top of his head. This third blow would be the last one, and Tatewaki died inside the crater the drop kick had created. Naruto turned again and jumped onto one of the clay hawks Deidara had made for them, before turning back as he sensed something strangely familiar. His stomach began to ache, but that was easily solved by channeling more natural chakra to the area of his seal. When he turned around, he saw the pseudo-Jinchuriki of the 9 tails looking back at him, slitted pupils glaring back from blood-red eyes. In his left hand were the claws that he used to fight, only now they were unconsciously lengthened to several feet. His right hand was holding back the little princess, who was screaming as she tried to get to Tatwaki's body. Naruto decided to encourage his fellow holder of the 9 tails to better take his place before he left. If you want to be worth our coming to get you, learn to become the weapon you meant to be. Beating the 9 tails will be better reputation than beating its worthless Jinchuriki anyway. Sora growled under his breath as the 2 blondes that had decided to make his life hell left with the promise to return once they were ready for his corpse. He finally let the young girl, who he'd learned was called Chio, run to her protector's body to cry. He walked over to Sasuke's battered and unconscious body to heave his rival up over his shoulder. He could only wonder who this Itachi guy was, but if he was an Akatsuki and had it out for Sasuke, the last Uchiha would have to become much stronger. He walked up to the crying princess carrying his classmate, and could only put his arm on her shoulder in comfort. "We should get out of here. He would have wanted you to be safe," said Sora sadly. His own emotions were a tangled mess, but he had to keep it together as the mature one. He began walking with the girl not far behind him to find his teammates, and go home. Sasuke regained consciousness on the way back, but Sora still had to steady him to keep the Uchiha upright. Chio followed in complete silence the whole way. They met up with the others 3 hours into their slow limp. Ino was the first one to spot them, as she was on guard duty, and quickly alerted the others. As leader of the mission, Shikamaru swallowed the lump in his throat to debrief Sasuke. What happened? Despite his attempts to keep his voice level and in control, his voice cracked halfway through the simple question. Akatsuki? Sora was the one to respond, as he had been there during their assault of the capital and the massacre of everyone who tried to resist. The blonde one from before and his partner. We never stood a chance. The mention of the dreaded organization and the specific member who had put him in a genjutsu-induced coma for over a month was enough to make Shikamaru, and to a lesser extent Choji, freeze up in terror. Ino and Sakura, however, had no idea who Akatsuki was, other than someone who could beat up Sasuke and destroy a city. They weren't any less scared at the concept than Shikamaru and Choji were. The only difference was personal experience with the missing ninjas. Sora was the one to break the scared silence. He said they weren't allowed to hunt me for a while, but they can't kill me until then. I don't know how long we have until they come for me, but we should get this mission done with and go home. Shikamaru could only nod in agreement. The group cleaned up their camp with the fervor that comes with fear and panic, before heading back home to the Hidden Leaf. It had been 3 years since Kisame and Itachi had slipped up and accidentally killed the Three Tails. The beast had no doubt reformed by this point, and Sasori and Zetsu had their spy networks working overtime to try and find it. Until then, Akatsuki was free to gather tailed beasts once more, with the threat of a painful death delivered by God himself should they delay the plan further. Deidara and Naruto decided to be the first ones to capture one of their targets, and so had struck out to the hidden sand, where Sasori had informed them the one-tailed Jinchuriki had actually been appointed Kazekage. Hopefully the knowledge that the Jinchuriki was S-rank would offset the lack of respect that being the one-tailed Jinchuriki would get from the other members of Akatsuki. After all, this was all about proving themselves. "Do you have all the clay you'll need?" asked Naruto, almost worriedly, but covered with a mask of calm. Yeah. Deidara paused, as she realized what she had just said. She shook her head and continued. "I've even got some pre-sculpted art ready to go. When I let loose C3, they won't be able to find the village hidden in the sand." "Fine, as long as you're careful. We can't both fight on 2 separate birds, and both of us on one would be too slow. I won't be able to help you up in the sky. I'll make good our escape, but that won't mean anything if you die," chided Naruto. "Alright, I get it," exclaimed Deidara. "Fight the Jinchuriki, don't kill him, get out." "With the Jinchuriki," added Naruto. "That's implied," said Deidara. "I have more than enough clay, and I won't need all of it. It's not like he can fly, yeah?" As it turned out, he could fly. Or at least the sand could, which amounted to the same thing. Infiltrating the village had been a snap. A quick bit of high-altitude flying had gotten them over the walls, and unlike the Hidden Leaf, the hidden sand had no barrier seal to detect intruders. Sasori's spy network had come through once again, and Naruto jumped off of the bird as they passed over the walls. Hopefully right after the guard changed shifts for the night to give Deidara as much time as possible. The ninja watching the skies had been few, and were easily dispatched with several precision bombs. Deidara assumed that any fight that involved her, fighting a Kage or not, would draw the attention of the entire village. Not really seeing a need for subtlety, she rarely did, Deidara decided to throw down the gauntlet by bombing the Kazekage's mansion. Before her small flock of exploding geese could make contact with the building, however, the wall they were aimed at seemingly came off and engulfed her art. The explosions came out more as dull thuds, instead of the destructive sledgehammers they were supposed to be. Deidara looked away from her failed bombing attempt, and was surprised to see a red-haired teenager standing opposite her on a floating platform of sand. The boy could only be the Kazekage, or some boy who matched the target exactly and had stolen the Kazekage hat. Looking at it closer, it was a stupid hat. Deidara would give the most basic right to be transformed into art though. It was a right she extended to everything. Except Jinchuriki, she had to take those alive. Deidara was taken from her mental meandering by the large stream of sand that shot towards her from the mass of grains in front of the Kazekage. As she absent-mindedly sent her hawk into a steep dive to avoid it, she continued thinking about the kid she was supposed to capture and later kill. He was quite the looker, but she was out of his league anyway, in more ways than one. It would still be a shame to rob him from the girls of his village. Maybe she'd leave them the hat. It looked stupid anyway. Deidara finished justifying the mutilation of the Kazekage, and looked up to see a massive face looking back at her, mouth wide as her bird hurtled towards it. She pulled up, and the mouth reached up to snap at her. She pulled up, and quickly spun to the side to dodge the stream of sand from before. She had heard what the Kazekage could do with his sand, and she knew if she was caught in it, she was done for. She tossed her right hand out, and the two birds inside it came to life and sprinted for the Kazekage from opposite directions. The sand beneath him shot up from both sides and blocked the birds, which exploded anyway. The sand retreated back to ominously float around its red-haired master, and Deidara pulled up across from him. She had gathered that he wasn't one to talk, so she was slightly surprised when he deigned to do so. I have been warned of Akatsuki and their intentions towards me. But know that as Kazekage, I cannot lose. Cool, yeah? I get to be the second member of Akatsuki to kill a Kage, shouted Deidara, emphasizing the point with a small, four-winged bird that went flying from her left hand. She had perhaps hoped that the bird would prove faster than the sand and defeat the Kazekage then and there, but she wasn't overly annoyed when the sand came up to block the bird and succeeded. After all, the smoke from the failed explosion concealed the first bird's twin that had emerged from her right hand moments later. The Kazekage would lower his sand to try and keep an eye on her, and the second bird would swoop in and detonate. Naruto had been worrying too much when he had insisted she bring a third bag of clay. The second bird swooped around the edge of the sand shield to dodge any remnants, and Deidara was shocked to see a large mass of sand move to the left to block her second bird as well. She growled under her breath at the sight, which came with the knowledge that this might not be as easy as she had first thought. Responding to the Kazekage's emotionless gaze, the sand began to chase Deidara across the sky once again. Their game of cat and mouse got more complicated when Ballista began to fire bolts into the sky at her as well. The spiked poles were easily dodged, but the explosive notes that fragmented the metal tips into shrapnel were more frustrating to avoid, and the sand constantly trying to catch her in a bear hug wasn't helping matters. Luckily, her attention was free to focus on the Kazekage, as a blonde blur was down below, burning the anti-air defenses to a crisp along with anyone manning them. The Kazekage's expressionless gaze contorted to one of anger as he saw his people being killed, and Deidara saw a tendril of sand shoot out to catch her partner down below. "Oh no you don't, yeah!" shouted Deidara, as more four-winged art flew quickly at her opponent, forcing him to recall his sand. "I'm your opponent here!" The Kazekage was more than glad to try and vent his frustrations on her. Naruto had decided to spare Deidara some clay and trouble by destroying the ballista that had been firing at her in the sky. Apparently, the Kazekage could fly, though Naruto had faith that Deidara could handle it. That faith wouldn't stop him from coating the ballista in a healthy amount of oil, followed by an unhealthy amount of flames. He had already finished preparing the surprise for anyone who decided to follow them out of the village. Unfortunately, his arson and murder had drawn the attention of several ninja in the area. He wasn't overly worried about killing them, but he had hoped to take a break and store up chakra for the sealing later. He still had no clue how Akatsuki planned to seal the tailed beasts, but he was sure that it would require chakra. Chakra he would have to waste on the three ninja before him. One was wearing a Jonin flak jacket from the hidden sand, and had half of his face covered by some sort of drape. The other male was strange. Whatever idiot decided to wear all black and carry 3 heavy scrolls in the desert deserved to be congratulated for surviving this long. He wouldn't be surviving much longer. The third was the only girl of the group, and had her straw blonde hair done up in what appeared to be 4 different ponytails. Her large war fan told all that she was a large area wind jutsu user. The 3 monsters that came out of the stupid one's scrolls were similar to Sasori's puppets, and Naruto finally understood his ridiculous get-up. It was still stupid, but the puppet user was apparently supposed to be some sort of Bunraku puppeteer. The 3 looked around the flaming rooftops where Naruto had loosed his devastation and horror, before focusing on the cause in anger. The first to attack was the girl, swinging her fan in a wide arc. The sweep sent out a wave of slicing air, but the blades were so dispersed and weak that Naruto was just able to stand there and take it like a gentle breeze. The second to move was the idiot, or more specifically his puppets. The 2 human-shaped ones shot forward, clacking the whole way in a manner that rather made Naruto want to smash them to bits. After circling him pointlessly, they loosed a barrage of Saban and Kunai which, while no doubt poisoned and lethal, bounced off Naruto like he was a brick wall. One of the puppets sprouted 6 arms and moved to attack with blades that emerged from the inside of the arms. Naruto sensed the other puppet come up behind him, chest cavity open wide to swallow him whole, and smashed the worthless puppet to pieces with a single punch backwards. The first puppet caught him in bear hug, but the blades all shattered harmlessly. The puppet quickly went the way of the first, but the pieces floated back together in front of the puppeteer. The girl bit her thumb and drew it across her fan, which Naruto could only assume was some unorthodox summoning contract. The first thing to emerge was a paper lantern that was followed by some pirate weasel wielding a scythe in its mouth. If he didn't sense the enormous and focused amounts of wind chakra applied to the blade, Naruto would feel like cuddling with the adorable little thing. Before the small beast could chop off his head, or at least attempt to, Naruto jumped forward and brought his legs into a tight curl to dodge the blade of wind that passed harmlessly over him. Naruto delivered a powerful mule kick that certainly broke several ribs, as well as pulped some organs, to the jonin that had tried to sneak up on him. The intense pain broke his concentration on the weak genjutsu that had taken his place over by the other two while the puppets had attacked Naruto. The weasel was still quickly approaching Naruto, however. The ridiculous one's large puppet, an armor type if he remembered Sasori correctly, had also breathed a stream of flames into the blast of wind, making it even more deadly. Naruto ran through several hand seals in midair as he continued through his kick. He finished as he landed, and slammed his palm on the ground. The weasel's side shattered upon contact with the stone-toed statue that Naruto had summoned beneath him. The burning, cutting wave of death was right behind it, and Naruto could feel the heat coming off of it. He could have taken the blow easily, but his Akatsuki cloak, while durable, wasn't invincible. And while bearing their attack head-on would be impressive, continuing the fight in the nude would be considerably less so. Naruto decided to have some fun and show these impudent fools what a real wind jutsu was and ran through the hand seals for one of his favorites. Sage Art, Wind Style, Bunker Buster. Naruto's cheeks expanded as he mixed the three chakras and converted it into wind-natured Sage Chakra. Seeing the jutsu spit out of his mouth, the puppeteer beckoned to the blonde girl, and the two hid inside his remaining puppet, confirming Naruto's suspicion that it was an armor-type puppet. Not that that wasn't exactly what he had been counting on. The ball of wind chakra hurtled towards the large armored puppet, but Naruto only smiled in assured victory. The Bunker Buster was a jutsu he had developed specifically for destroying enemies in enclosed spaces that were thought to be safe. The jutsu performed its function perfectly, as it punched a hole clean through the metal shield to enter the safe area. Naruto appreciated the reaction time of the two inside, as the wind hadn't even fully penetrated the armor before it opened and the two started to jump out. It was quick, but ultimately useless. The second stage of the jutsu activated then, expanding rapidly and violently, theoretically crushing everything inside the bunker against the very walls that were supposed to keep them safe. It was a technique designed for small spaces, so the open air made it far less lethal, and in reality it only stunned the two jonin and sent them flying. Naruto resolved to finish the job and head back to the rendezvous with Deidara. After all, the other members of Akatsuki would no doubt be moving in on their targets. Naruto was looking forward to interrupting them with news of their junior success. Naruto even planned to tell Sasori to hurry up with his own capture, and maybe throw in an art comment, just to piss off the puppeteer. The battle in the skies was considerably less one-sided. The Kazekage had certainly earned his title, though Deidara was willing to guess his defensive skill was his strong point. Even with the redhead sparing glances to check up on Naruto's clash below, Deidara had to use more clay than she would like to even keep his attention on her. And he had still blocked every single one. It was like the sand moved of its own accord to protect him. That last thought gave Deidara an idea. An awful idea. Deidara got a wonderful, awful idea. She had been focusing on the Kazekage as her opponent, but if the sand was autonomous, the sand was her real opponent. The Kazekage just controlled it. And if he could get it to hang around him and block her bombs, he was the only who could get it away from himself. She continued the complex aerial maneuvers that had kept her out of the realm of certain death, as she prepared a lot of smaller clay birds. She loosed the bombs, and the Kazekage's sand pulled up around him, but suddenly stopped when he saw where the birds were headed. The Kazekage's eyes widened in fear, not for himself, but for the innocent spectators that were Deidara's real targets this time. He was forced to rely on a large amount of sand from the desert ground to prevent the explosions from leveling a good portion of the city. To Deidara's eternal ire, the sand still had enough speed left to block the four-winged bird that she had sent straight at the Kazekage. But the sand had definitely been sluggish. She just needed to take more of his concentration. As much as she hated to resort to such extreme measures, it would appear she would have to bring out the big art. Guess you value their lives pretty highly. Deidara shouted over to the Kazekage, who glowered in return. Unperturbed, Deidara continued to bait the Kazekage. Let's see if you value their lives above yours. Deidara pulled out one of her pre-made sculptures, a bell-shaped masterpiece, adorned with wings and face of artistic despair. Realistic? Not at all. True art? It would be in a moment. The already large sculpture grew to enormous proportions on its descent to the middle of the village when Deidara made the first seal. The second seal was the signal to detonate. The Kazekage lifted his arms sharply into the sky as the large mass of art Deidara had affectionately dubbed C3 exploded into a brilliant ball of flaming death. The brilliant light was blinding to Deidara's uncovered eye, but her eye scope easily filtered the light, allowing her to use the distracting explosion to launch her second, smaller and faster, piece of art at the Kazekage. If he hadn't used his sand to block the massive bomb below, Deidara had no illusions that her most recent bomb would have no luck at all. The hidden sand would be gone, but the Kazekage would be fine. But if there was one thing she had learned as the Setsuki's apprentice, other than the fact that old people didn't understand art, it was that the village came first. Her suspicions were confirmed as she heard her bird exploded against within a foot of the Kazekage's chest, blocked by only a few grains of sand. The light faded, and Deidara could better see the massive shield of sand that the Kazekage had used to completely block her C3. She looked over at the redhead to make sure he was out of it before moving in to capture him. Deidara was shocked to see him not only airborne, but clinging to consciousness and trying to manipulate his sand again. At first Deidara looked around in terror to find the sand that was no doubt attempting to crush her at the moment, but she then noticed that he was actually moving the mass of sand away from its current position above the village. He was actually trying to keep the sand from falling on the village and hurting people. Deidara was awestruck that he would go to such lengths to keep his village safe. She could respect that, and took the struggle to move the sand as an unspoken last request. With great effort, the Kazekage moved his sand outside of the village's outskirts, and finally allowed it to fall. Deidara's bird flew underneath the young village leader and caught him out of his freefall. He was quickly wrapped up inside the tail feathers of the clay mount, and Deidara flew off to meet up with Naruto. She let out a sigh of relief, and though she wouldn't admit it, she was glad Naruto had convinced her to bring more clay than she usually packed. The Kazekage had been the toughest opponent she had ever faced, and she had almost gotten crushed inside giant balls of sand, or smacked out of the skies. If she had been carrying any less clay, she might have lost an arm or something. And that would just suck. Haydn stood above his latest tribute, a man who apparently had a rather large bounty on his head. He still had a regular amount of blood though. Haydn had checked. It wasn't like Kakuzu needed the blood to cash in his bounty. Need I remind you that the quarry has to be recognizable for me to get my money? Speak of the devil and he shall berate your methods of killing. Kakuzu was Haydn's opposite in every way but one, and it was because of that one thing they had been paired together. While Kakuzu was covered head to toe, minus an opening for his eyes, Haydn went shirtless and wore his Akatsuki cloak halfway unbuttoned. Kakuzu was economical in every movement he made, never doing more than was necessary to get his money. Haydn killed for the fun of it, or the religious significance if you were to listen to him, and preferred to drag out the kill for the maximum pain possible. Ah, fuck off. I killed him, not you, so don't go bitching about how long it took, swore Haydn. If you were in such a hurry, you should have stepped in and done it yourself. If I did, you wouldn't shut up for weeks, countered Kakuzu. Besides, your way. We have one. Be ready tomorrow. Kakuzu's sentence was cut off by a voice that spoke directly into their minds. A voice that commanded respect, even from Haydn. The voice of Akatsuki's leader. The message was short though, and Haydn and Kakuzu were left to ponder which tailed beast would be first. About damn time. As expected, Haydn was the first to resume the immortal banter. Who do you think it was? Probably those two blonde idiots were the first to try, though if that's the case I'm surprised they succeeded. Answered Kakuzu absent-mindedly, hoping he had enough time to cash in his bounty before they began the whatever it was they did once they captured a tailed beast. Hey, this guy's bounty that it isn't that art freak and the sage. You up for it? Questioned Haydn as he poked Kakuzu's stomach with his elbow. This kind of disrespect would usually cost someone their life, but Haydn would probably enjoy Kakuzu's effort more than he would expire from them. It's already my money, said Kakuzu. He paused for a moment in thought before continuing. Double or nothing. Well, I sure as hell don't have any use for your damned money, why not? Haydn remarked after a second of thinking about it. I'll even treat you to dinner when I win. Ha! We have one. Be ready tomorrow. Sasori and Zetsu stopped what they were doing at the sound of Leader's voice. Sasori set down the tools he had been using to make his latest masterpiece, and Zetsu stopped eating the extra parts of Sasori's latest masterpiece. Right as soon as the deadline passes too. It's not that impressive. I bet one of them died in the process, said Zetsu and Zetsu. His two halves spoke in their own separate voices, and conveyed completely different opinions, but Sasori had grown accustomed to his partner's oddities. Now he didn't have to dispose of the extracts he had whenever he made a new puppet. He personally didn't require food, and with Zetsu eating his scraps, the two could avoid civilization entirely except for when their occupations as Akatsuki's spy masters required it. It doesn't matter if one of them died. I'm glad we already have one so soon after the deadline. I hate waiting. said Sasori. We should get a move on ours. I hate making others wait almost as much as I hate waiting myself. His voice that was significantly less gruff than most of Akatsuki would think. One problem with being forever young was that fact that his voice had never actually deepened much. He could usually hide it with Hiriko, but he need finer control when making a new puppet. Sure thing. Let's go for the 7 tails, exclaimed Zetsu's white half. Great idea. If you want to die, that is. We should target the 3 tails first, grumbled Zetsu's black half. Enough. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. For now, we need to finish up here so we'll be on time for the ceiling, said Sasori as he picked his tools back up. He dug back into the corpse before him and removed the other kidney, tossing it to Zetsu. The plant man snatched it out of the air and took a large bite out of the organ like a raw, meaty organ. We have one. Be ready tomorrow. The voice of God spoke directly into the minds of Itachi and Kisame simultaneously. The two realized that today was actually the 3rd anniversary of their blunder with the Mizukage. They were impressed that someone had moved so quickly, but not really surprised. Ha, already? Chuckled Kisame. I bet the zombies have been stalking their prey for a year now, pissed that they couldn't kill him and collect the bounty. Internally, Itachi chuckled along at his partner's joke, but like a true Uchiha, his face betrayed nothing but boredom. The two have their vices, but they're useful to Akatsuki, stated Itachi in his monotone voice that struck terror into the hearts of those who heard it. Except Kisame, who seemed to find it funny. Never said they weren't, laughed Kisame, showing off a mouth full of filed teeth. Let's finish up here and get ready to deal with that tailed beast. The shark man used his sword as leverage to get to his feet, the motion lopping off the head of the corpse he had been sitting on. As he stood up, Kisame dusted off his Akatsuki cloak with his hand, as if the gesture would somehow remove the blood that stained both him and the surrounding area. Itachi, as usual, was spotless. Somehow Kisame wasn't in the least surprised. Let's find somewhere more private. Itachi and Kisame walked away from the clearing that they had filled with the blood of an entire platoon of hunter ninja from the hidden mist as if the entire affair had only taken 10 minutes out of their schedule. In reality, it had taken 5. Deidara picked up her partner and, now that her bird was carrying 3 passengers, slowly began to fly away at a low altitude to conserve energy. The 3, one unconscious, weren't very far from the village when they heard their getaway device explode violently in the distance. Deidara whistled at the sheer size of the explosion that Naruto had placed to deal with any pursuers. Damn. I thought you were joking about that sage chakra stuff. We so have to make more of those later. The bombs in question had been made more potent by Naruto's sage chakra after he had the idea to supercharge his partner's explosives. The resultant blast was something neither of them wanted to be caught in. You want to use those in combat? Asked Naruto, raising an eyebrow. Well, it's your funeral, I suppose. In reality, Naruto wasn't keen on giving anyone the secrets of sage chakra. One didn't become an S-rank ninja by passing out their secrets, but vehemently denying it would just make Deidara suspicious. I guess you're right, yeah? Said Deidara dejectedly before perking right back up. But what about remote bombings? Like the one we just pulled off, yeah? We wouldn't be anywhere near them. Naruto thought about this, and came to the conclusion that he had no plausible excuse. Deciding that it would be a greater risk to deny his partner without a reason, he relented. He could always make up some excuse about the chakras not mixing right and becoming unstable later. Alright, but later, okay? Right now we have to deal with this Jinchuriki. As Naruto looked down at the red-haired Jinchuriki, he wondered what his life might have been if he hadn't been found by Akatsuki. The hypothetical scenarios that resulted all had one thing in common. Whether he ended up working for a hidden village, dead, or meeting Akatsuki as a Jinchuriki instead of a member, they all ended up with him losing the freedom he had come to love being an unaffiliated ninja. Answering to pain instead of being killed by him was definitely the better of the two options, and he could still be a loyal toad summoner. He felt some remorse about fighting the hidden leaf, which the toads were currently allied to via Jiraiya, but Fukasaku had reassured him that there was nothing new about this kind of situation. This had reassured him about the correctness of his actions, but he was still uneasy about actually fighting Jiraiya. The man was also a sage, but with about 50 years of experience more than what Naruto had. He had run the fight through his mind hundreds of times, and he usually lost. He had trained for that fight though, and had developed several strategies to at least increase his odds of survival. Naruto was broken from his mental worrying by 2 familiar chakra signatures quickly approaching the Akatsuki members. He stood up and jumped off of the bird without ceremony. Deidara stopped and turned to her partner quizzically. I wasn't as thorough as I should have been, said Naruto as he faced towards the 2 approaching hidden sand ninja. I'll catch up later. Deidara shrugged but decided that Naruto could take care of himself and left. She had only made it several meters when the reason for Naruto's departure became obvious. "Give us back our brother!" the blonde-haired Jonin shouted, emphasizing her point with a large swing of her slightly tattered fan. The boy's slightly broken puppets let out a barrage of saban and kunai that were propelled by the wind. The blast kicked up a massive cloud of sand that temporarily obscured their view, but they remained on guard. They had learned the hard way not to underestimate their opponents, but they were still surprised by what they saw when the dust settled. "I had thought you had some common sense when you tried to hide from me. You had just been doing your job, and I had no real reason to add 2 more to the body count," said Naruto, completely unscathed despite the weapons surrounding him and the large gashes that dug trenches in the sand around him. Glaring at the two so fiercely they took a step back, he continued. "But now I see I have no option but to rid the world of your idiocy." Naruto's hands were a blur as he ran through the hand seals, clapping them together loudly on the last one. His chest swelled as he reared back to let loose his technique. "Sage Art, Total Wave!" Naruto forcefully spat out the golden liquid as a veritable wall, leaving no hope of dodging. The girl swung her fan, but the tattered fan could only put up a token resistance against the Sage Chakra-powered technique. The two were doused in the oil easily, but were otherwise unharmed as the wave passed. They wiped the oil from their eyes in time to see their opponent launching another technique, this one not as harmless. Sage Art, Majestic Flame Devastation. This jutsu required only a single hand seal, and was nearly unavoidable. The only downside was the sheer amount of chakra it literally burned through. As a sage, though, that wasn't really a concern for Naruto. The wave of flames launched towards his unfortunate opponents, who tried to move out the way. They found to their horror, however, that the oil also doubled as a high-powered adhesive, and they could only stand and watch as their doom came hurtling towards them. Naruto watched as the flames passed over his enemies, burning the oil quickly and hotly. The flames were quickly blown out by a strong wind, though, at least on the boy. Naruto eyed the girl in surprise before she collapsed to the ground. She had used the last of her strength to put out the fires on her brother. It was a meaningless effort, though, as Naruto walked up to the boy with the intent to finish him off. He was shocked to see that the boy was not only still alive, but actually fighting to remain conscious. Naruto decided to taunt his opponent a bit more before sending him off, in light of the fact that he had let them go once already. "I'm feeling generous," said Naruto, which was a complete lie. "So I'll give you a choice. Should I kill you now, or let the wounds kill you slowly?" Naruto was impressed by the sheer tenacity the puppeteer showed in actually responding. "Fuck off." The response was less than eloquent, and Naruto glared angrily. Insulting him was basically insulting Akatsuki. Out of the respect he had for the organization, even if they would kill him should they discover his Jinchuriki status, that could not be allowed to stand. "Now then," said Naruto, emphasizing the point with a solid blow powered by Sage Mode. It might not have been as eloquent as Sasori's poison or as extreme as Deidara's art, but hitting anyone in the back of the head with the force of a wrecking ball would result in death. He leaned down and whispered to the body of the black-clad Jonin. He was certainly dead, but Naruto could pretend that he was giving a fellow warrior a bit of reassurance. "You were either stupid or brave to fight me like this. I killed you for the stupidity, but for the bravery, I'll leave your sister alive. The wounds will still kill soon her unless the hidden sand has some good medics. It was more stupid than brave anyway." Naruto stood and began to walk away from the carnage he had wrought upon the dunes, leaving one corpse and one unconscious body behind him. He looked around to make sure there was no one watching, and then broke out into a sprint. Deidara could cover some serious ground, and he was running behind. "Think we're ready?" A pair of onyx eyes looked back at the speaker questioningly, who in turn decided to clarify. "To take on them, Akatsuki?" "Not at all," responded Sasuke grimly, before smirking. "I'm prepared to take out the entire organization, but you might want to sit this one out." Sora tried to lightly punch the Uchiha in the shoulder for his smug attitude, but they were both winded from their test, and it came out as a badly aimed swing that swished harmlessly past. Realizing he had no physical strength left, the blue-haired Jinchuriki decided to bring the spar back into the realm of words. "Shut up. We totally got this. I've just been training," mentioned Shikamaru, who was significantly less tired than his friends. "It's you two that have been trying to match S-rank ninja in such a short amount of time." After the events in the Land of Honey, Sora had begun to take his training far more seriously. Sasuke had joined them after both of his teammates left to study medical techniques under the new Hokage. With no one to train against, he had found his way to Team 10, and he and Sora had become decent enough friends over the last 3 years of non-stop training. Their goal to surpass both each other and Akatsuki drove them head and shoulders beyond Shikamaru and Choji, who continued training as they would have otherwise. Kakashi and Asuma chuckled at their students' antics. I can't believe they managed to get the bells from you because of a book, Kakashi. Exploiting your opponent's weaknesses is one thing, but that was just sad," said Asuma as he turned to his ko-sensei. The two had quickly decided to work together in training their pupils to defend themselves against the organization of S-rank ninjas that wanted them both dead. Kakashi wasn't one to be bested so easily, and fired right back. "Oh? At least my student isn't better at my technique than I am. Maybe you should work on your flying swallow a bit more." The one-eyed Jonin was smirking at him, but that mask prevented Asuma from seeing it. He could tell, though, it was in the eye. Any further banter between the sets of rivals was cut off by the abrupt arrival of Sasuke's two teammates. Sakura was the better medic of the two, and was the first to speak. "Guys, the Hokage want to see us all right now." The urgency in her voice was poorly masked, and the whole group was slightly taken aback by the sudden summons. "What's wrong?" Choji recovered before the others and spoke up to inquire what was wrong, as befitting his kind nature. "Lady Tsunade will fill in the details, but it's something to do with the hidden sand," and Ino trailed off, unsure whether or not to continue. She steeled herself after a moment, and spoke the last dreaded word. "Akatsuki?" The mention of the S-ranked ninja had the attention of all present. Sora and Sasuke in particular wasted no time in getting to the Hokage's office as quickly as possible. Choji and Shikamaru were off a second later, though with less urgency and more complaining. Kakashi and Asuma eyed each other for a moment, and decided then and there that no matter what happened, they would keep their students safe. 3 days? Exclaimed Deidara. We stand here doing nothing for 3 days just to move the tailed beasts 20 feet into a statue. Didn't people invent Jinchurikis because stuff like statues couldn't hold tailed beasts? Pain stood in the face of the tirade calmly, then answered in a voice that commanded respect, whether you wanted to give it or not. This statue is uniquely suited for containing the tailed beasts. And unless you prefer fighting a tailed beast one-on-one, you would be wise to follow the 3-day schedule. The statue certainly looked unique, like some kind of demon fresh from the torments of hell. From the bit in its mouth, to the 9 eyes in its head, to the chained hands, the statue was the stuff of nightmares. Besides, it may take less time, with all 10 of us. The seal will be balanced with 10 sources of chakra, and we might be able to speed things along. Elaborated Conan, her amber eyes being the only discernible feature on the projection cast via their rings. Well then, let's get a move on. I hate waiting, said Sasori as his silhouetted figure reappeared on the statue's left thumb. The remaining members of Akatsuki took their places on the fingers that their own rings were placed upon. The 10 S-rank ninjas placed their hands in a simple ram seal, and waited for the statue to do whatever it did. They were only mildly surprised when the chakra flow through their rings increased drastically. It had always siphoned off a little bit to keep them working in case pain had to contact them, but the previous trickle of chakra was incomparable to the flood of chakra it took now. Pain's ringed eyes were full of steel as he formed the seal last, and declared the name of the jutsu. Sealing technique, 10 phantom dragons consuming seal. As if his words were a trigger, which they probably were, the bit fell out of the statue's mouth, and 10 dragons made entirely of chakra descended on the red-haired Jinchuriki that lay unconscious before them. The Kazekage was lifted up into the air as red demonic chakra seeped out of his eyes and mouth. Naruto found the entire experience wholly unsettling, mostly because it would be exactly what would happen to him if he were ever found out. He could only hope that Sora had enough of the 9 tails chakra in him for whatever Akatsuki planned to do with the tailed beasts. Haiden, I'll take my winnings in cash after the sealing, said Kakuzu, addressing his partner with his usual gruffness. Unless you've decided to not uphold your end of the bargain. Fuck off, you 5-hearted freak. You'll get your damned money once this is all said and done. Jashin has no need of it anyway, replied Haiden, though for someone who didn't need the money, he sounded awfully annoyed about letting it go. Mind me asking what this bet was? Asked Naruto, quirking an eyebrow even though he knew they would only be able to see a shadowy figure. I thought that if it was you two that had captured a tailed beast, either you or the bitch would have died in the process. Haiden replied before Kakuzu could, and the Stitch Man was very unhappy about the details of their bet getting out. Kakuzu? Would you be a dear and stitch Haiden's mouth shut? Asked Deidara with all the false sweetness she could muster. Kakuzu's red and green eyes widened in shock. Why have I not thought of that before? His eyes quickly narrowed and looked to his right. Haiden noticed the look and awkwardly laughed. Hey Kakuzu, buddy! You wouldn't really stitch my mouth shut, would you? His only reply was a thin tendril that emerged from Kakuzu's arm and snaked upwards. Haiden's pink eyes widened in fear for a moment, and he was soon thrashing around as something seemed to attack his face. Luckily for Haiden, he managed to hold the ram seal the entire time, and not disrupt the sealing. Deidara laughed and even Naruto couldn't hold back a smile at Haiden's muted swearing. Teams 7 and 10 arrived at the Hidden Sand Village and were ushered in with one of the least comprehensive ID checks Kakashi had ever been subjected to, even by his own village. It was just one more sign of the catastrophe that had befallen the village. Structurally, there wasn't a grain of sand out of place, but anyone could sense the air of despair and sorrow that was practically radiated by the citizens in the wake of their Kazekage's capture. It was testament to how shattered the village was mentally that the Leaf Ninja wandered around for several minutes before a nearby Chunin decided to escort them to the Kazekage mansion as quickly as possible. When they arrived, Sakura and Ino were quickly identified as the medics that they had requested from Lady Tsunade, and were whisked away, presumably to the infirmary. The others followed them, and the trauma left behind by Akatsuki continued as they walked past rows of bodies, all burned to a crisp. The wounds looked gruesome, and the smell of death hung heavy in the air. When the group found Sasuke's teammates, they were standing over another burnt corpse, the only difference being the fact that this corpse was still alive. The two girls were visibly sweating from the effort of keeping their patient alive. The burnt flesh began to heal, and Shikamaru's eyes widened in horror as he recognized Temari. She had been scheduled to make the trip to the Hidden Leaf to help him plan the next Chunin exams in several weeks, and now here she was, barely clinging to life. Despite the fact that she was a competent jonin of her village, Shikamaru had somehow expected her to be out of the combat, crying about how her brother had been captured. Shikamaru's eyes then narrowed as he realized that the Sand sibling that hadn't been kidnapped, or nearly dying, was nowhere to be found. Where the hell is Kankuro? I guess he's doing something important if he can't be here when his sister is dying, grumbled Shikamaru. One of the Hidden Sand genin who had been identifying bodies walked up to the Leaf Chunin and meekly tapped his shoulder. When he turned around and glared at her, the brown-haired girl barely managed to squeak out what she had meant to say. Lord Kankuro died when he was chasing after the Akatsuki who captured Lord Gaara. Unlike Lady Temari, who's gotten worse since we found her, he was dead when the search team found them. Her message complete, the genin scurried back to the bodies, which she continued to attempt to identify under the horrendous burns. Shikamaru was struck speechless. He had picked up on the despair, and even seen the bodies, but until that moment, Akatsuki had never hurt him. Oh, they had hurt him, but the physical pain was temporary. But until now, all his encounters with Akatsuki had left everyone he knew alive, if not well. He could vaguely hear the medics of Team 7 talking about how Temari would likely pull through, and heard himself express some sarcastic relief, but he really heard nothing over the sheer horror and rage directed at Akatsuki. Sora looked around the room, finding the slow healing of burnt flesh too disturbing for him. Unfortunately, the room was full of bodies that were in far worse shape than Temari was. "Excuse me, I have to get some air," said Sora, holding back his lunch. He managed to make it to the bathroom before he couldn't hold back the expression of disgust and horror. In the privacy of the bathroom, Sora allowed his tears to mingle silently with the bile. "Idiot, this is all part of being a ninja," muttered Sasuke, though if he was completely honest with himself, it took all his Uchiha pride and personal will to keep from doing the same. Choji had simply closed his eyes, but one had to look no further than the unopened bag of chips in his hand to see how disturbed he was. Sakura and Ino were both of the same mind, focusing entirely on the work before them to ignore the horror around them and even the truth of the wounds before them. Kakashi bore it all with the same air of sorrow the Hidden Sand ninja all had. He and Asuma were all too familiar with the horrors of war, and even though this just a single 20-minute attack by two people, it rivaled some of the worst battles they had ever witnessed. Sora emerged from his emotional and physical purge as the girls were finishing up all they could do for Temari, the perfect image of tranquil fury. The bandages over his right arm were bulging as the Nine Tails chakra responded to his rage. "Asuma, when are we going to end these bastards?" asked Sora, his fist tightening so fiercely they threatened to draw blood. Asuma turned questioningly to Kakashi, who in turn faced Sora and filled him in on what he had missed. "I sent out Pakken to try and get a trail. We don't have anything from the Akatsuki members, but they'll be carrying Gaara, and there's no lack of his scent around here," explained Kakashi. He raised his voice to address the entire group. "I suspect he'll be back by morning, but until then we all need to get prepared to face Akatsuki." The group trudged off in different directions to find their rooms and rest off the 3-day run to the Hidden Sand. Kakashi himself let out a sigh, but quickly tensed at the subdued killer intent directed at him. He turned around and found himself looking a woman who didn't look a day under 90 who was glaring angrily at the silver-haired jonin. Deciding to not cause an international incident, or at least start one, Kakashi tried to be friendly. Hello? What can I help you with?" The elderly woman glared back at him as if he had done her some great personal wrong. When she did speak, her words were dripping with malice. "I suppose you wouldn't remember killing my son among all the murders you've committed." Kakashi tried to keep senseless killing to a minimum, and hadn't killed any Hidden Sand ninja old enough to be this woman's son, which left him confused and speechless. But if I want to reach the only family I have left, I need to get at Akatsuki. I'll do anything to save my grandson, even if it means working with the White Fang. The last two words were spoken as if they were the most vulgar of curses. The reason for this woman's anger, as strange as it was, finally dawned on Kakashi, and he quickly tried to assure the shorter woman. Ah, you have me confused with my father. The White Fang of the Leaf has been dead for over a decade. The woman turned a scrutinizing eye on him, looking at him carefully from head to toe. Just when Kakashi was about to crack under the pressure, she began laughing, though the sound was more aptly described as a cackle. I was just pretending to be senile. Kakashi was certain that she had truly mistaken him for the White Fang, but decided to appease the older woman and began to awkwardly laugh as well. The woman slowly backed out of the room, still laughing, and by the time Kakashi thought to ask her what she had meant by finding Akatsuki, the old woman had left. So what are we going to do with the body? Asked Deidara. Do we have to, put it some special Jinchuriki corpse disposer or something? The shadowy figures of Akatsuki looked toward their leader, who responded. Decide amongst yourselves. It matters not. The simple dismissal opened the gates for the argument of what they would do with the corpse of the fifth Kazekage. Zetsu's white half was the first to voice a suggestion. We should eat him. Before any other member of Akatsuki could shoot down the proposal, Zetsu did it himself. Ridiculous. He would taste like sand. It wouldn't even be worth the trip. Kakuzu was the next to suggest a disposal method. Sell him. The money from a Kage's corpse is good enough. Being a Jinchuriki in addition to that, and he's worth a large fortune. His suggestion was met by mumbled arguments from his partner, who had yet to fully unstitch his mouth. The last valid option came from Sasori. I'd love to have another Kazekage. I would have to collect the body before it starts to decompose, but Zetsu could pick it up quickly enough once this is over. The hunched-over puppeteer and the immortal bounty hunter both looked at the two blondes that ultimately had control of the Kazekage's corpse. Deidara was torn between the two, and if she was perfectly honest with herself, unsure of what to do now that two of her more aloof seniors were contesting over something she had. Naruto came to her rescue with his sage logic, calm as ever. There's no rush. The body won't be going anywhere for another 2 days regardless. This placated the two Akatsuki members that were vying for the body for the moment. The cavern fell silent once again except for the moans of pain from the Jinchuriki that was slowly having the life sucked out of him. The relative silence didn't last long, however, as Zetsu spoke up again, his voice conveying less of its usual joy and more of its usual frustration. There are two groups of leaf ninja headed towards the base. One is coming from the hidden sand, and the other group is headed from the hidden leaf. If they continue at this pace, oh no! They'll reach the Kazekage before we're done sealing. We'll deal with them when they get here, said Naruto confidently. He looked at Deidara, who returned the cocky smirk. No. The single syllable from pain was enough to wipe the confidence off of their faces. They must not be allowed to reach this chamber while we are sealing the tailed beast. We'll deal with them before they reach us. How? Questioned Deidara as respectfully as she could. We can't leave the sealing ceremony, or else the whole thing fails, yeah? How are we supposed to stop them before they get here? I'll need 2 volunteers to buy us some time, preferably members with large chakra reserves, said Pain. Kisame and Naruto tentatively volunteered, wary to be guinea pigs, but confident in the knowledge that no one could match them in sheer chakra reserves. Good. I have a technique that will let you deal with them, while remaining here. Remember, you're going to buy us time, not show off. Kisame and Naruto swallowed in unison, and then felt a third of their chakra disappear.